So, shall we start? I think we can start. I'd like to welcome all participants. Thank you for joining today to our general introductory webinar on ethics and integrity in Horizon 2020, in Horizon Europe, sorry. Before I start, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Firat Gedikli. He's the NCP on legal, financial, and IPR issues and ethics from TÜBİTAK, to welcome you all and say a few words about their role in this project. Firat.
Thank you, Odysseus. Good afternoon, everyone. As Odysseus told, my name is Firat Gedikli, and I'm one of the legal and financial NCPs of Turkey in the EU framework programs. And today I'm representing the operation and coordination unit of the project at TÜBİTAK as a member. And I would like to welcome you all for this general and introductory training on cross-cutting issues in Horizon Europe, focusing ethics and integrity. And also I would like to thank Vincent for his time and attendance to this event as one of the main contributors. And personally, I look forward to listening his contributions and presentations today. Before we start, I would like to give you a short introduction about the project, in which we organize a variety of events, including today's. Today's event is organized within the scope of Turkey in Horizon 2020 Phase 2 project, which is co-financed by the EU and the Republic of Turkey, and implemented by the Republic of Turkey Ministry of Industry and Technology within the scope of Competitive Sectors Program. This project has been designed to elevate Turkish research, science and innovation standards, as well as reinforce the capacity in alignment with Turkish research area. In this context, more than 150 events and activities that are taking place and planned to be organized. Under this project, we have info days, which are held in different regions and cities of Turkey, offering an introductory level of information for the newcomers about EU Horizon Europe program. Besides, we have general and introductory trainings as we experience today, aiming to introduce an introductory information, and a focus group trainings aiming to gather a specific group with a concentrated information about a specific theme, field, or part of the Horizon Europe program. We have also intellectual property rights trainings, as we experienced last week, targeting experts of potential stakeholders who are dealing with legal, financial, and IP-related key rules, concepts, procedures to be followed of the program. Last but not least, we have also project writing camp trainings, international networking events, study visits, and national advisory group meetings and events organized under SME support package in the project, whose primary goal is to boost Turkey's participation and success in Horizon Europe program. You can reach all this information about the past and upcoming events via the project website. I'm sure Kemal Bey or Selin Hanım from the project team would share the link of the website with you during this event via the chat. By taking chance of giving this brief overview about the project, I would like to thank you as a representative of TÜBİTAK for your time and participation to today's events, and wish you all a very successful and informative training. By finalizing my welcome speech, I give floor to Mr. Odysseus Spiroğlu, one of our key experts in the project, for sharing his introductory remarks with you and for launching today's trainings. Thank you for your attention. Odysseus, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Firat. I'd like to welcome again the newcomers. I see that the participants are raising, and I'm happy to see that we have a lot of people now joining. So a few things about the agenda. I will start with an introductory session on cross-cutting issues in Horizon Europe. So I'd like to present the context, how ethics are introduced in Horizon Europe. Then we will have the pleasure of listening to Professor Muller. He is an expert in ethics and artificial intelligence, and he will talk to us about ethics in science and technology, and how we can and we should consider ethics in future and emerging technologies. And he will also give us some interesting examples and maybe use cases. And we will close with a more practical session on how you can handle ethics in Horizon Europe proposals. This is the agenda as we have suggested. We also have Professor Banu Burak from TÜBİTAK. She's an expert in ethics in health research, so we will also hear the Turkish perspective. So without further ado, let me share my screen and start the presentation about. Okay. Okay. Can you see the right screen now?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. So, just a reminder, a few things about myself. I'm the key expert too. I'm responsible for legal, financial, and IPR issues. I have a background in engineering, information technology, and financials. And for the last 20 years, I've been working in various EU-funded projects and proposals, building consortia, managing projects. So I have worked from the concept to the implementation of the project and to the exploitation of the results. And I mainly specialize in project management, intellectual property, and business processes. I'd like to remind to our participants the context of Horizon Europe. I'm not sure how experienced you are. We have a few slide questions which we will run at the end of my session, so we'll have the chance to collect some feedback from you. But a short reminder of what Horizon Europe is. And I suppose that all of you know that it's the most ambitious EU research and innovation framework program up to now. The idea is that we want to strengthen the EU scientific and technological base, so make European research area stronger, and of course boost Europe's innovation capacity and competitiveness without forgetting the citizens' priorities and the socioeconomic models. The program is structured in 3 pillars. In the first pillar, we have the excellent science. So we could say that pillar 1 is science for science. Pillar 2 is science for society. So in pillar 1, we support scientists. In pillar 2, we try to find solutions and we try to address specific challenges. And in pillar 3, we try to support innovation and SMEs and create tangible results. And of course, there is an horizontal component, which is called widening, and it has to do with activities and calls that go beyond Europe and try to bring the surrounding countries, the associated countries, together with the European research area. Everything starts from the Commission priorities. So it's worth mentioning them, and it is very important to keep them in mind because you will see them, you will see these things repeated again and again in a number of calls. So the priorities for this Commission are, of course, to support a better climate, to make Europe the first climate neutral continent and make it more resource efficient, to support digital transformation, so make Europe fit for a digital age, but at the same time make sure that the economy that Europe builds works for the people with quality jobs, with investment that does not destroy the environment. And at the same time, it supports it promotes the European way of life, the rule of law, the core values, the European democracy, and making Europe stronger with a more important role in the global geopolitics. The recovery plan for Europe, the Next Generation EU, it's another plan that aims to help Europe overcome COVID-19 problems and situations. The Horizon Europe is based on work programs. So the work program is a document that describes every call and every priority of the EU, and it does that in a very structured way. So from the EU priorities, we have the strategic plan where all these priorities are taking form under the key strategic orientations and specific impact areas and expected impact. So a difference between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe is that now we have in our calls very detailed descriptions of what Europe expects to see in the proposals. This is just a slide for the main differences of Horizon Europe with Horizon 2020. I'm not going to stay along a lot of time in this one. I have more slides than I will elaborate here because I think it's worth having them in the presentation, and you can download them later on from our help desk. A lot of this information probably you already know, but it's good to have them, to have everything in one place. So these are the key strategic orientations from the European Union, the European Commission. So you will see that we have 4 areas. We have digital transformation, environmental protection, sustainable development, and resilience and inclusiveness. So every proposal, every call addresses these problems: how to make Europe cleaner, how to make Europe more climate neutral, how to support a sustainable economy, a more just economy, how to restore Europe's ecosystems and biodiversity. And in every orientation, we have specific impact areas. So we know what we expect from every orientation. And then we have the clusters, which is basically the structure of proposals. So for those of you who were working in Horizon 2020, we had the thematic areas. Now we don't have thematic areas. Everything is organized under clusters. We have 6 clusters, which are quite extended in terms of scope. And all these clusters have goals and priorities that try to address the challenges that Europe has defined. And in the first orientation, you can see the specific impact. So we have competitive and secure data economy here, the industrial leadership in emerging technologies, cybersecurity, digital technology. And for every impact area, you can see which clusters contribute with specific goals. So now I'm going to skip the rest of the slides because basically it's a presentation of all the strategic orientations. So it's not something that it's important to now. For now, what it is important is to understand that there are some major changes between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. And for that, we are going to dedicate a few webinars and a few trainings to explain how we are going to address them. One of the major changes is that we now have new instruments. We have 2 new instruments. One is called the European Partnerships, which are initiatives that bring together the private and public sector for joint research and innovation activities. And we have specific European partnerships. So we have a European partnership for artificial intelligence, data, and robotics. We have plenty. If you Google it, if you go to European Commission website, you will find out that there are quite a few. Then we have missions. We have only 5 missions, but these missions are quite ambitious. And they will produce calls. So we will have a new work program for missions. It will be announced in early 2022. And this work program will have certain calls that will fall under one of the 5 missions. So either fight cancer or adapt climate change or actions, activities on how to improve the biodiversity of oceans, seas, and water, or smart cities, or soil health and food. International cooperation is another important aspect of Horizon Europe. What you should remember here is that we need synergies. So any kind of synergies between projects that you already have or you had in the past is beneficial to Horizon Europe proposal. So you can bring together projects that you have already implemented in the past, even national projects, and use them as a basis for new research. Or you can combine projects that you already have or you plan to have with proposals for Horizon 2020. And you should remember that international mobility calls like Marie Curie calls or calls that involve countries outside Europe like United States, Canada, Australia are also very beneficial. And these are some issues that the Commission expects us to create synergies with. And finally, you can see that one of the ideas is that we bring as many third countries as possible and regions in order to reinforce the level of cooperation, especially in open science, in ethics, in safety and quality. So, and that takes us to ethics and a group of 8 cross-cutting issues. So ethics is just one of them, but we have 7 more. They are relevant to all program components. So every single call, every single program will involve some kind of one or more cross-cutting issues. And these cross-cutting issues, they should be addressed appropriately. That's why we organized, we have already organized a webinar on social innovation and dissemination and exploitation. And now we are organizing this webinar on ethics and integrity. And we will continue to organize more webinars. We also have a training on open science, and we have both a webinar on an introductory webinar on open science, and we have a focus group, which is a 2-day training. All these are recorded. All these you can find them in our help desk and in our YouTube channel. So I invite you to look them up, and I'm sure that you will find some very interesting presentations there. So let's dig in a little bit on the cross-cutting issues. Let's start with the ones that were more or less known to most of us, and they existed even in Horizon 2020. We have social science and humanities. Social sciences are now a cross-cutting issue, so you will find it in every call. And it should always be a key component of research and innovation. And the idea is that every research, every result, every innovation that we are working on and we are going to propose certainly has some societal impact. So think about AI. which is also the field of Professor Muller, think about robotics, everything will have a societal impact. Driverless cars, for impact, it will have a societal impact. So we need to assess this societal impact in our proposal. It doesn't, it's not enough if we just say that there is a societal impact. We now need to explain what impact that will be and how it will affect society. And this is why we need also social scientists incorporated into our proposal. Then we have the dissemination and exploitation, which is already known to you. We now have new tools to support exploitation and dissemination. We are interested to see what will happen beyond the end of the project. So not just during the project, but what will happen after. Will the innovation suggested, will it be sustainable in terms of business? Then we have the key enabling technologies. And again, in Horizon 2020, we had specific calls for artificial intelligence or for micro nano electronics or for advanced materials. Now you will see them incorporated. So you can use these technologies across your proposals. They don't have to be defined. They have to be not. They don't have to be explicitly mentioned in the call. You can use them wherever you feel that there is a place for them. And of course, we have social innovation. So that matches also the social science and humanities and the social impact aspect. So whenever you are researching something in tech and science, you should think about how you can combine these tech capabilities with organizational and social practices. Let's explain a little bit more on each one of these cross-cutting issues. So what is social sciences and humanities integration? It's the process of specifically including research and researchers from social sciences in your proposals. So even if you think that social sciences do not have a place because your proposal is too technical or it's too scientific, it's engineering or it's nanomaterials, think twice and think if you can include social scientists into your proposal. And the three aspects that you should think of, it's democracy, how what you are suggesting will affect the European democratic values, cultural heritage, of course, how we can safeguard and promote our cultural heritage, and any social and economic transformations. So if I was to give an example, I would mention driverless cars, for instance. They will have a very big effect in the industry. So if we say that in 10 or 20 years time, we expect to see only driverless lorries, trucks, what will happen to the people that are now driving the cars? What will happen to drivers? So we need to take this into account when we are working into such proposals. Now for dissemination and exploitation, things are easier. So what you need to make sure is that these are not the same. So communication is different from dissemination, and exploitation is different from communication and dissemination. If you want to clear them out, what you need to remember is that communication is about promoting the project and informing the society. So when you have a strong presence in the social media, when you're organizing open events for the citizens, when you are simplifying the results so that everybody can understand, this is communication. When you are disclosing the results into appropriate means, may say a scientific publication, or you're participating in a conference, then you are disseminating. So you are giving the results to the scientific community. And of course, exploitation is what will happen with these results after the project. How are you going to commercially exploit them? How are you going to develop them? How are you going to create or manufacture anything out of this? And you don't always have to commercialize everything, but you do need to have a plan on how to exploit data, how to use them in the best possible way. Now, the key enabling technologies we already briefly mentioned. These are the 6 broad key enabling technologies according to European Commission. If you Google key enabling technologies, chances are that you may find different lists. In most lists, you will find these six technologies, but you may also find others, or you may also find more specific technologies. Now, these are broad categorizations of the technologies that European Commission made in order to help us understand what they mean in their calls. They are non-sectoral, they are strategic, and we need to follow an integrated approach to the development of and the deployment of this technology. So we are working on nanoelectronics, but we may work in health, we may work in advanced materials, so there may be a synergy between them. We work in artificial intelligence, which has applications in health, but it also has applications in computing or in finance. So you can see that these technologies can lead to countless applications, and we should consider them horizontally. Social innovation, again, is wherever new ideas can solve social problems. So we need to address social needs, we need to create social relationships, and we need to form new collaborations. And whenever we are trying to innovate, we should keep in mind that there is always a social aspect. A social innovation may be possible throughout what we're evolving, and we should promote that. We should make sure that we are working on social innovation at the same time as we are evolving our project, our proposals, our solutions. Now, gender equality, of course, gender inclusiveness, this is new. There was an aspect, of course, of gender equality and gender balance in Horizon 2020, but it wasn't that prominent. Now, there is a clear political will to promote that and eliminate gender inequality as much as we can, of course, and as much as possible in these proposals, and integrate the gender dimension in all proposals, and to address unconscious bias and systemic barriers. What is important is that public institutions will need to have a gender equality plan by 2022. Otherwise, they will not be able to participate in calls. So it's not something that you should take lightly, especially if you are researchers in public institutions. You need to create, your institution needs to create a gender equality plan, a gender equality strategy to address specific issues, and this is a prerequisite. Ethics and integrity is again the subject, a cross-cutting issue, and it is the subject of today's training. And here we can include a lot of things, from the ethical dimension of the new technologies, which is the most difficult asset and the most interesting, to more, let's say, underlying principles of how you conduct research and how you ensure that your research has integrity, and what are the principles and regulations and legislation that you should abide by. And of course, as you work on your projects, you should consider not only to address these issues, but even to contribute towards this issue. So if you can have, if you can develop a new training or some educational material or some operating procedures that could lead, let's say, to a privacy by design principle into whatever you are developing, then it is something that you should consider and you should try to succeed. Open science is nothing more than making sure that whatever you are researching, whatever you are producing, is follows the FAIR principle, which is findable, make it findable, make it accessible, make it interoperable, and allow it to be reusable. So your results, the results that you are going to produce during your research, need to be available, need to be reproducible. The scientific community needs access to them in order to progress. For that, we now have a number of tools. The most interesting tool is the European Open Science Cloud. It's a portal where you can host results, you can host raw data, and you can, as researchers, you can also reuse whatever is in that platform and make sure that you don't start again from scratch. And of course, there is always some requirements in your proposals, like the research management plan. So not only you have to abide by these principles, but you also have to describe how you are going to do that, and even at the proposal stage. And finally, we have the EU taxonomy. A lot of discussions recently about the EU taxonomy. It's nothing more than a classification system where you have a list of environmentally sustainable economic activities, and these activities can be used to scale up investment and implement the Green Deal. Now, the idea here is that we create a list so we know which activity is fundable and which is not. The discussion and the controversy here is because not everybody agrees on which on the technologies that are green and safe for the environment. So we have some countries believe that we should include nuclear energy, especially now with the innovations in small scale reactors, and there are others that dismiss it. Or we have countries that believe that we should continue to use coal and maybe gas as a during a transition period, and there are others that are against it and believe that we should stop right away and move to an electric future. And where can you find all these things that we just discussed? There's a number of documents. We have a strategic plan, and then we have the work program. The work program is produced every 2 years. So now we have the work program for 21-22. The work program, it's one for every activity, one for every pillar, one for every cluster, one for every initiative. So there is a specific work program for the health cluster, for instance, or for the digital industry and space cluster, and of course, a specific work program for research infrastructure, or for Marie Curie actions. Now, you don't need to read all of them, although if you are working in horizontal issues, you may find opportunities in all of them. So it's up to you. But you definitely need to read the strategic plan and then find the work program that's more appropriate to you and try to define the opportunities in that program. The proposal template is a new template, and we now have not only the grant agreement, but we have the annotated model grant agreement. So the proposal template is the one that you will need to complete if you want to participate to the program. And the annotated model grant agreement, it's like a manual. It's a huge document, but whenever you want to see how you're going to implement the project, you can go there and see not only the relative clause, let's say which actions are eligible, which costs are eligible, but also detailed explanations on how to claim these costs. And that's all. I hope that I gave you a good overview of Horizon Europe and how you are going to, let me stop share so that you can see me, how you can deal with these issues. I think that we have some questions. I'll start from the last. Okay. Now, there are some questions regarding eligibility. If all participants should be from different countries or the same country. This is a prerequisite when we are talking about collaborative programs. Then we need consortia from different countries. And we need that because the idea is that we need to learn to work together to solve problems. The idea is not that you have an idea and you work alone to create a solution for that idea, but you try to expand your horizon, you try to include multidisciplinary, you try to follow a multidisciplinary approach, you try to find out how you can collaborate with other countries, with other institutions from other countries, and you build a kind of collaborative proposal. But in every call, you will find in the work program and in the call text, very specific instructions of what is expected from you and who is eligible and why. Another question, if I can read it correctly, is how much importance is given to tourism technology projects? Sustainable tourism is the horizon in Europe's future. Okay, so tourism indeed is an industry that has suffered during the COVID crisis. There are programs directed to tourism. I'm not sure if these are under ISMEA projects. There is a recent one, a recent call under ISMEA, supporting tourism companies, which also involves cascading funding. So the beneficiaries of this call will also distribute smaller funds to smaller companies. But there are also calls that are non-sector specific. So we have calls like the calls of European innovation ecosystems. You could use these calls to target the tourism sector. Or you could see in which other work programs or in which other clusters you could develop something in tourism. Maybe, for instance, in agro-food, you could use tourism as a business case, as a case, and develop a better value chain for tourism using new technologies. What else? I cannot see any other question. Is there should gender equality plans be accepted and started? Yes, if you are a university, you should start working on your gender equality plan before the project application. You will need to do so I am not sure if they will require to upload the whole plan, or if it is, or if you just describe the main issues of the gender equality plan. I'm not sure about that because 2022 it will be the first year where they are going to implement that. So I'm not really sure how they are going to implement it, but it is for sure that you need to have, as an institution, as an organization, a gender equality plan before you submit a proposal. Any other questions? Please feel free to ask. Is there any example of gender equality plan? No, there is not. There isn't any template provided by the European Commission, if this is what you mean. There are some projects that help institutions understand what they expect and what these are. I will post them in the chat in a few minutes when I need to find the links. And there are proposals, there are calls that are also dedicated to providing help and support for the development of gender equality plans and gender equality tools. So there will be supportive actions, and I hope that there will be some kind of either a template or some kind of supporting material for institutions when they want to create a gender equality plan. Okay, don't worry about questions. We can always address them after the later sessions. I suggest we move on with something more interesting than my presentation, and I would like to introduce Professor Vincent Muller. He's European Authority in Artificial Intelligence and Ethics, and I'm really excited that we have him here with us to give us his view and his approach, and talk to us about his work and how we should think about ethics in a technical or scientific context, and how we can integrate it with our ideas. Professor Muller, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Odysseus. Actually, to make a link between what you said and what I said, I would like to ask you a question. So don't turn off your microphone yet. I need you. Could you summarize in one sentence what the European Commission, according to what you just told us, would say is a successful project? So if they look back on the project, right, you do something, what would be something that was a success?
It's a tricky question. It's different if you say what is a successful project or a successful proposal. Mm-hmm. A successful proposal is the one that gets funding.
Right.
A successful project,
with the hope that it becomes a successful project.
Yeah,
indeed.
The successful proposal doesn't always turn into a successful project.
Yes.
So in that sense, I would say, and without limiting to ethics or to anything, I'd say that the successful project is a project that can produce some tangible results. And by tangible, I don't necessarily mean a product that you can take into your hands, that offers a solution, or a project that creates something that others can use. So it can be a lower TRL level if it is a research project. and you don't create something that will go to market, of course, but you do something that society and science will benefit from. So you progress the science in some sense. If you are closer to the market, then the expectations may be higher, because you need to see something that will be somehow exploited, either in a product or in a solution or somewhere in the market. So to my mind, this should be a successful project. It doesn't have to be how it will be advertised or how it will be promoted, but it has to leave something. It has to leave a mark.
Okay, good. You see, if you ask an academic to answer a question in one sentence, you get
papers.
You get a lot more than that.
Publications.
But okay, so let me try to summarize that. So a successful project is a project that produces something that is beneficial to science and society. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind as a sort of guiding light, right? So we want to produce something that is beneficial to science and society. So that is important because it leads to what I'm going to say in a minute. It's also, I think, really important because it is different from what you and me do in our everyday lives. So in my academic life, for example, successful work is not the same as work that is beneficial to science and society, but it could be, for example, work that makes me a famous researcher in some field, which, however, the society doesn't give a damn about, right? Because it could be some kind of specialist area which nobody cares about. So it is different. Science funding in a conventional sense is very different from the European framework funding. The European framework funding has political aims. So I think that's really important for us to keep in mind. They're saying we have certain things which we want to improve in Europe, and we want to fund science that does that. You mentioned tons of those things, right? So lots of political aims that we want to further. So that is what I would like you to keep in mind for the presentation that I'm going to do. So the project that you want to apply for should give the impression, at any rate, that you will produce something positive that furthers science and society. Okay, that's what you should say. We are going to do in a credible way, and so on. So that goes beyond the mere technicality of producing a decent piece of research or a decent piece of work in a particular area. Okay, because a decent piece of work might be a very good way to kill people. Okay, so a decent piece of work should be beneficial to science and society. That is what is the interesting part here. So that's what I want to keep you in mind. That's the link between the overall framework that Odysseus outlined and the slightly more specific thing that I'm going to talk about. So I will share my screen now to show you this. So here I guess you can see my slides now. So this is about ethics and integrity. So I would like to make a little introduction by saying what I don't do. Here's a little sketch, which I think is interesting. So this might be your situation. You're all required to complete a class in ethics. Somebody would object. Wouldn't that make us the only ethical organization in our industry and create a competitive disadvantage that leads to our demise? Because it would create a disadvantage. And then the other guy replies, stop worrying, the class is required, but I'm not expecting any of it to stick. So I hope that things don't turn out like that, okay, today. I hope that some things are going to stick. Notice that I can't really see the Q&A while I'm talking. This is a little tricky, so I have to give a little slot for that. Okay, so that's what we're not going to do. Good. So let's see what we are going to do, hopefully. So the idea is that you should be able, after this little discussion, to recognize what an ethical problem is, provide a basic analysis of it. You should understand the difference between descriptive and normative statements, because that's really elementary for the discussion that we're going to have here. Understand the importance of the question, what should I do? Because that is the basic question of ethics. And hopefully you'll go out to be a bit more motivated to be a good person and a good engineer, which links to the questions above. Okay, so let me start with that distinction, because I think it's quite elementary and kind of useful to have in your life, generally speaking. So there's a distinction between descriptive statements versus normative statements. So descriptive statements, as the name indicates, describe things. So they say how things are. Okay, so most of what Odysseus was talking about was descriptive. He said the European Union has this structure, they expect you to do this and this and this. A normative statement says what should be the case, right? So it does not describe the world, it describes how the world should be. So the one can follow from the other, because you can say the European Union expects you to have a gender plan, Odysseus says, therefore, you should include a gender plan in your proposal if you want it to be successful. Okay, that's a normative statement. So here are some examples of these two things, some more examples. So we have an unprecedented amount of data nowadays. Data is likely to change the world. People have values and follow norms. Whoops, there's a two there, too many. This describes how the world is, okay? It describes ethical things to some extent, right? You could describe very clearly ethical things. I don't know. Johnny killed his wife, okay? That's a descriptive statement. Now, you could say a normative statement is, you should have told me that my girlfriend is cheating on me. So you didn't do that, but you should have. Survival is more important than privacy. So we should do something to avoid COVID, even if it does violate privacy, perhaps. Or an engineer should act in the public interest. Okay, so ethics is concerned with normative statements, the red ones on this slide. Okay, not with descriptive statements. The point is, we always use both. Okay, implicitly in everything that Odysseus said, there were normative statements there. So they suggested, this is how things are, therefore you should do this. Okay, so that's the normative statement. So you should do something that is beneficial to science and society. That's the subject matter of ethics. So looking at the same story from a different angle a little bit. In ethics, first of all, the word ethics, the etymology is that it comes from ethos, which means something like customs. In English, we also have the word morality, and that is basically the same. It's just the Latin word instead of the Greek word. So it also means the mores are the customs, what one does, what people do. Okay, so I don't know, if you enter a mosque, you take off your shoes. If you enter a church, you don't take off your shoes. Okay, that's a custom, right? It's the thing to do. So if I go to Turkey and go to a mosque and keep my shoes on inside, that is violating the customs, right? And there is a connection there between what people happen to do and what people should be doing, right? Because if I go to the mosque and don't take my shoes off, I'm disrespecting the holy place, and therefore there's something wrong with that. I'm disrespecting the place and the people who worship there, right? So therefore, what one does has quite a lot to do with what one should do. And I'm sure you know that story from, I don't know, your mom, right? She told you things like, oh, people don't do that kind of thing, right? And she meant you shouldn't do that kind of thing because people don't do that kind of thing. But of course, it should be a little bit more sophisticated than that. We should not just say, oh, that's what people do, therefore that is what we do, right? We should think about whether what people do is right. Okay, maybe people do bad things, and we should not just follow their examples. So that's why we need ethics as a discipline, second bullet point, which is the systematic reflection on the normative. So we should not just take what we get from the society or mom or something, but think about it ourselves. We're adults, right? We should think about what we think is right. So what I want to avoid here, it's very important for me, is that people think of ethics as this thing that other people tell you what to do. That's okay for children, but for adults, it's not, right? So what we should be thinking of is what I think I should do. Okay, so Immanuel Kant already 200 years ago said the basic question of ethics is, what should I do? Okay, that's what he thought is the basic fundamental question. So try to remember this thing. Ethics is normative, and the basic question is, what should I do? Here's a little example that I thought is compelling. The example is in a little picture on the left. Maybe you've already thought about this instead of listening to what I've been saying. So there's a chess game there. Black is to move, and if you think about it, can you checkmate the king of your opponent, the white king, on the baseline there? Now I realize, of course, that I'm now in Southeast Europe, so to speak, and people don't play so much chess, but they play more tavli and backgammon and things like that. But if you play a little bit of chess, then you will know that taking that, how is it called? Oh, damn it. Sorry, the tower thing. It's not called the rook, no. And taking that onto the black one anyway, and taking that onto the baseline on what would be, I guess, A5 next to the king, that would be a checkmate. So very often in your life, that's one way to think about ethics, is you, or in fact continuously, you think about this question: what should I do? What should I do next? Okay, this is sometimes called action selection in AI anyway. That's a common way of calling it. So what should I do next? You know, should I go to this presentation on ethics in Horizon 2020, or should I do something else instead? Okay, so how do you decide that? Now, in the case of the chess game, you might think, okay, I'll try to find out what's the winning move, and I'll play that move. Okay, but that might not be all there is to it. So you might think, what's the best move? But let's say I'm playing with my son, who's not very old and not very good at chess. And I'm trying to think, what's the next move? Now, I could decide what's the next move in the sense of getting the best move to win. But maybe when I play with my son, I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to have a good time and trying for him to enjoy playing with his dad. And so I'm not trying to, you know, crush him. Okay, that wouldn't be a good way to deal with your children. So maybe I'm going to make a move which gives him a chance to win. Okay, so what did I do now? I widened the frame of discussion. So instead of looking just at the technical problem of how do I win the chess game, I broadened the frame and said, what do I want to achieve here? Okay, in this case, I want to achieve that we're having a nice afternoon playing together. Aha, so for that, the best move might be to give him a chance to beat me today. Okay, we both know that I'll give him a chance to beat me. That's fine, and we laugh, and that's okay. Okay, so I think that is very characteristic of ethical discussions, that you broaden the frame and you say, what is it that really matters here? And you try to think of that. So that's why I think what Odysseus did was really good, because he made that quite clear. You have to broaden the frame towards the benefit for science and society. That's what you should try to think of. How can I benefit science and society in my work? Then that is the right thing to do. So that's not the same as technically doing what one does. You see, technically the right move in this case is absolutely clear. There's no doubt what's the right move. But maybe that's not what you should try to do. Okay? Good. So that's the framework for this discussion. I was going to ask some questions, but that doesn't really work. I think the interaction is kind of tricky here. Maybe I can ask Diamandis, who's also listening. Is Diamandis listening?
Yes, here.
Yes, good. Diamandis, so what's the basic question of ethics?
What Immanuel Kant said, what can I do, or I am supposed to do?
What should I do?
What should I do? So in case I'm a project, a consortium, and I'm about to build something, a new system, new service, to have a good understanding about the big picture of what I'm about to build. So something like if Zuckerberg had thought about what he was about to introduce, whether this was a good idea or how he could have proactively taken care of not allowing hate speech to foster in Facebook. But on the other hand, we always have a very limited understanding of what we are going to build. So someone manufactures knives so that people can cut their bread or their food, and not about using it to kill other people. Okay, which means that at some point it's a difficult thing. The question, what should I do, may have continuously different answers there. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. So the question, what should I do, is the central question indeed. And the knife manufacturing is exactly a very nice example, because it depends on what kind of knives you manufacture and what they're good for. So if you manufacture a knife, for example, that can be hidden in something which looks like a walking stick, and you can pull it out and it's designed in such a way that it can stab people, then it is very clear that you're not manufacturing that thing for cutting tomatoes, right? so what you manufacture actually has an influence on what people can do with it. Yes, people can abuse stuff for all sorts of things, right? I mean, I have a cup here. I could, I guess, hit somebody over the head with that. Yes, which is clearly not what it's designed for. But that's different from having a club, which is designed for hitting people over the head. Okay, so when we're designing something, it does make a difference what we design it for. I am a little bit conscious of the time. So officially, I have another 7 minutes, which would suggest that I should be speeding up things a little bit. And I think
the next presentation is yours.
Yes, I remember that part. So, yeah. Okay, good.
No,
so
we're okay from time, so
good.
Don't worry.
So let me try to give you one example of the kind of thing that I have in mind here when I talk about ethics in general, before I go into the technology in more detail in the second half. So one example is which I'm going to talk about again in the second half is bias. Okay, so I think the picture on the bottom shows bias really, really nicely. Okay, so here are these two people. One is writing something silly in mathematics, and you might take a judgment, oh, they're bad at maths, or if there's a girl, girls are bad at maths. I am pretty sure that you've heard people do exactly that thing, for example, with driving, right? Somebody does something stupid when they're driving, and you say, and then people will say, what a stupid driver, what is he doing? If a woman does this, people will say, look at her, women. Okay, that's bias, right? So you characterize somebody by a feature which is actually irrelevant to what is happening there. So you think the women, it's relevant to the driving that what the gender of the person is, but actually we know that statistically this is not true, right? So you're much more likely to be dangerous on the road if you're young and male, for example, right? That is characteristic. And if you're quite old, that's also a danger. But being a woman does not make you more dangerous. In fact, makes you less dangerous than average. So it's an irrelevant feature, okay? So bias has this feature, has this phenomenon that you judge people by a feature which is actually irrelevant to the matter at hand, okay? There is a ton of research on that, and there are lots of different biases, which I think I will just not go into right now, cognitive biases and biases in statistics and so on. But what we have to do is we have to try and see, when we're doing some kind of work, are we using a bias, in other words, an irrelevant feature, or are we using a relevant feature? So here is an example of that kind of a thing. That had some prominence in discussions about bias recently. This is a system called Compass, which is a parole recommendation system. So it's a system that is used or was used, I think still is used in various versions in the US for the decision on what's called parole. In other words, somebody who is being convicted of a crime can get out of prison earlier, and there is a decision whether it is a good idea to let them out earlier and the hope that they will improve their behavior, or whether they will be a significant risk to society. Okay, and they said, okay, we can try to make an automated system that does this, takes all the data in and produces the results. So here we have two people. Actually, I hope, by the way, that these are not actual names, but that's a good question. I don't know. So Vernon Prater has been judged as low risk by that system. His prior offenses include 2 armed robberies, 1 attempted armed robbery, and after parole, he was convicted of 1 grand theft. Prisha Borden was considered high risk, had a score of 8. Her prior offenses were 4 juvenile misdemeanors, which means sort of, first of all, juvenile means, of course, when you're young, below 18, and misdemeanors are minor offenses which are not called crimes. Okay, sort of like drinking in public or stuff like that. Hitting somebody, small things. Subsequent offenses, 0. So she gets a much higher risk score than Prater. And you do wonder, why is that? And what's the difference between the two? And of course, a difference that is immediately obvious to an American certainly is that she's Black and he's not, right? So there were people who found out that Black offenders was almost twice as likely as white offenders to be labeled higher risk, while the actual reoffending rate was identical. Okay, so in other words, they were massively discriminated against. So there was a response of the company, North Point, to that. I'm not going to go into the great details of this. And then there was a response of the people who accused these people. The point is, what should you do? Okay. So here, basically the columns on the right are perhaps irrelevant. So you have the predictions of future risk with race, and you see the blue column, okay, which are the African American male people, have a much higher prediction of risk compared to what is actually happening. So something is clearly wrong here. So the question which I'm suggesting is, you should ask yourself, what should a good engineer do? So the people in North Point, they did this. So the thing on the left, they say our prediction, which is the gray thing, is pretty close to the actual line, so it's fine. Okay, they look at it as a technical problem, but the people who investigated it looked at it as a more wider scale problem and say, what would it be? What would be good engineering here? And again, good engineering would not be just to say, okay, we make a system that is appropriately close to what's going on in the data, but is trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve. For example, in this case, we want a system that is fair. Okay, we want a system that is transparent. So you can explain to someone, for example, the judge, why the system says that the risk of this person is higher than the risk of this person. Okay, why do they get the score that they're getting? And so on. So you have to think beyond the mere technical solution of the problem to what you're trying to achieve and whether you're trying to achieve that, right? So I think that's an important message for this ethics discussion that I want you to take home from here, that you have to broaden the scope and think of your aims. The aims are normative, okay? So, the aims are normative, so they say what you're trying to achieve, and that is what you should be judging for. I think I will be very quick on this one. So how do you do the evaluation? Maybe I'll talk a bit about this in the next section. Yes, I think I will do that in the next section. And how one does this is I think is important, but I'll talk about that after a little break. So basically, the take-home message at this point is that ethics is about what I should do. It's a normative discussion, not a descriptive discussion, and it requires you to broaden the scope of your discussion. Okay, so I think I'll stop the presentation there for a second and have a look at questions, if any. There is a long Turkish question, which I won't.
You may need to have it translated, Vincent, yeah?
Yes, if somebody, I'm not sure whether the translator, whether this is a question about ethics, to be honest. I can see that it's something about nuclear power and turbines, but I'm not sure.
It's a long one. Okay, let's continue, Vincent, and we can address the question later.
Okay, good. So, good. So this was the general introduction to ethics. Now I want to see two more things, which the one thing I didn't get to, which is how do you do this, and the second thing is to look at some examples. Okay, so I'll go back to my slides and see how you could even evaluate something in terms of ethics. So try to think of an ethical problem. It could be a very simple one, like the one in the chess game that I mentioned before, or a more complicated one. But let's take a simple one. Let's say the following thing occurs. So I'm doing this presentation here. Odysseus thinks while he's looking at this story that, oh my God, this was a horrible mistake. Why did I invite this guy? This is a very bad job. Okay, so let's say he thinks that. So, and let's say after this meeting, which I will definitely do, I'll have a little conversation with Odysseus and say, okay, how did you think that went? And what should I do? And so what should Odysseus do in this case? There is a conflict here, it seems to me. So he could be honest, okay, and just say, well, sorry, Vincent, I think this was hopeless. I don't think we should be doing this again. Okay. Or he could be polite and say, yes, Vincent, blah, blah, blah. These are very nice things. I can see 1 or 2 points where it might be, you might be able to improve on it or something like that. Or you could say, oh, thanks, that was fine. So which of the things is what he should be doing? And how would you judge that kind of thing? So the typical ethical theories that we have suggest that you can judge it from basically 3 different angles, which is unfortunately where it gets a little complicated. So why are there 3 different angles? Because what we're judging here is an action. Okay, remember the whole thing is action selection. So we're judging an action. But an action, that's the thing on the left, I think indicates that very simply. So an action is something that is done by a person. So it has an origin. Okay, then you do something, and then it has consequences. Okay, so you can judge it by the person, the action, or the consequences, and the results might not be exactly the same kind of thing. Okay, so for example, Odysseus might think, okay, yes, this guy was doing a lousy job, but I don't have anybody else who could do this job, so I should not tell him that this was hopeless, because then I'm stuck. I don't have anybody who can do this job. This would be judging it in terms of consequences. Okay, or you could say, oh, I'm not going to tell him that this was hopeless because he'll be insulted. Okay, that is judging it in terms of consequences. You could judge it in terms of what kind of action is this. So for example, when you say to somebody, oh, this was great, while it was not great, you're lying. Okay, as everybody knows, there's something wrong with lying. Then again, we all do lie every now and then. So why do we do that? We do lie sometimes because we think there are other things which are more important than telling the truth sometimes. For example, the consequences, somebody would be hurt if we tell the truth, okay? Or because we think that there are values which are more important than the truth sometimes. For example, politeness. Okay, so if you get invited to your aunt and she serves you some food and she asks you, how is the food? You say the food was nice, thank you. Even if you don't like it, right? You might say it a little differently, but you are not going to say, I didn't like the food. Very unlikely, I would say, because you think the politeness here is more important. Okay, so you can do that, and you can also start from the point of view of the person. So you can say, what kind of a person do I want to be? I want to be, for example, a good person, a reliable person. I want to be an honest person. I want to be a good engineer. I want to be a useful member of society. That's what matters to me, what I am going to be. So if you look at it from that point of view, you have to decide what you think would a good person do in this case. So for example, a good person wouldn't be too hard on me. Okay. So as you can see, perhaps, I think that the main consideration that you should ask yourself in any kind of ethical question is, what kind of a person should I be? That is, I think, the starting point for a choice. Okay, so that's why when I said earlier about the chess game, what would I do? I would say the main thing here is to be a good father. That's more important. Okay, it's not the consequences that I'm interested in primarily, or what kind of action I'm doing. I'm saying, what do I want to be? I want to be a good father. That's what matters today. And a good father would do this. That solves the problem. Okay, so what I'm suggesting for this discussion is, I would say, don't think of it in terms of so much in terms of consequence. What do I need to do in order to get the project through or something like that? But think of it more in terms of self-respect. What should I do in order to be a good engineer, that I can respect myself and do what's right? So don't lie. Don't pretend that you're making kitchen knives when you're actually making military grade weapons. And try to think of it in those terms. What would you want to do? But you have to balance it, right? Sometimes you'll have to say, the consequences of this action, which I would think is normally good, for example, honest, are so bad that I'm not going to be honest now. Okay, that is, I think, a difficulty that we will not get away from. So there will be conflicts in everyday life. That's where ethics is interesting, right? Ethics is boring if I ask you, I don't know, should I go and steal the wallet from my colleague's desk? No, you should not, right? That's not the kind of thing a decent person does. Okay, end of discussion. But should I tell somebody the truth about the lousy job which they did? That's where a conflict occurs. And a conflict is where ethics comes in. All right, so the cases I'm going to talk about in the rest of the discussion have to do with conflicts. If there are conflicts, then it seems to me that's where the ethical story becomes interesting. And it's very good to be aware of these conflicts and bring them out. Okay, so some people that I work with have suggested that this is what you should go through. There's some kind of cycle here where you state the problem, make an analysis of it, think what the options are, and then evaluate it, and then you reflect again. So that's why they think of this as a circle on what the possible options are and how to evaluate it. The one thing that I would like to stress here, in my experience, is that we tend to be too simple-minded about the options. Okay, so we tend to say, oh, I can tell him the truth about the lousy job, or I cannot tell him the truth. That's not usually the way things are. Very often there is actually a middle way that where you can try to combine different aims that you're trying to achieve. Okay, so to make this a little bit clearer, that's the take-home message. So I said ethics is about normative questions, what I should do. You can evaluate these questions in basically 3 different criteria. What kind of person do I want to be? What kind of action do I want to perform? And what kind of consequences do I want to achieve? And third, sometimes there is a conflict between these things. And this is where ethics really gets interesting, where you say, yes, I want to be this kind of person, but I don't want to have these kind of consequences. So what do I do in these cases? Okay, so these are basically the 3 things that I would like you to take home from the discussion. In fact, today, the whole discussion. And we're trying to explain this a little bit in more detail in some cases. So I have prepared a second presentation about some
Before we move,
cases. Yes,
Vincent,
exactly. I was going to make a break there. Yes,
we can. We are using Slido, and we can ask some questions to the audience, and maybe this may be beneficial for our next presentation. So I have already prepared one question in Slido. Maybe Kemal can bring it up. It's the one you asked previously. I think it's an open text. What's the biggest question in ethics? Would you like that to ask? Would you like us to ask that question to the audience, and maybe you get some feedback?
Maybe not, because that sounds like a very theoretical question. I would like them.
Okay.
I would like to ask them more. What are examples of ethical questions that you have encountered?
Okay. I'm changing the text. Yes. What are examples of ethical
Problems,
problems?
let's say, that you have encountered. Obviously, in this context, right? We're not talking about you and your girlfriend or something like that, but you know, so
Yes,
there are ethical
so.
questions everywhere. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kemal, if you can open, it's the last question under the Adamantius poll.
Is there a URL where I can see the poll and the?
You will see it. Yeah, Kemal will bring it up in.
Oh,
yes.
Okay, good.
So you can scan, and we can see the questions.
The results, the answers.
The results, yes, the results.
Okay, our participants have not encountered any ethical problems.
Sometimes it's not so difficult, even if you have to question yourself to eat a piece of baklava or not, to enjoy the piece of baklava or to have to pay the cost of the extra calories, or in case you have to lose weight. So we all every day deal with many ethical questions. The thing is that, and this is also a side comment before to your presentation, Vincent, that somehow we are finding it okay if people have to face ethical questions, but we set the bar high when we are about to have a computer or an AI system or a software, a piece of software to take decisions, which means that we are used that humans, when they are physicians, clinicians, medical doctors, they can make very bad decisions. And it's okay. Some extreme cases may end up into the court, but if it's a software, a piece of software to take decisions, then we feel insecure. And also this is also to what Dr. Nuburuk will present later today about ethics in medical field and in health. But this is, I think, the insecurity we feel when we are about to give control to a software system, while it might be that software may not make as many mistakes as humans. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a good point. Software is likely to we're likely to have higher standards on that. But notice the interesting thing about the baklava problem that you indicated is exactly that. I think it's good to remember that these are the kinds of problems where there is no clearly right answer. Okay, you can say, okay, I mean, all things considered, I really want to have that sweet now, and I will go for a run later today and feel good about myself, and that'll be all right. The difficulty which exists in that area is known as the weakness of the will problem. So it could be that, all things considered, you think I should not eat this baklava, okay, and you'll eat it anyway. That happens, right? And that is the kind of thing where you feel I lost, okay? I caved into my desires, and that's where you will feel bad about yourself as a result. So that's something we should try to avoid, because it's bad for your psychological health if you think that is the case.
Or what I see another question there, or another comment, is about plagiarism as an academic misconduct. And the thing is that at some point we teach students to avoid plagiarism, but we train them so that they might still copy someone else's ideas, but rephrase them so that no human or AI system may spot there that it is actually plagiarism. Or it may be like the case of, we know that good people will do good things in general, bad people will do bad things, but then we need to train good people to organize themselves so that when they will do something that may be possible to be judged as a bad thing, that they have to ground their decision to look good. Yes, which is again not a very good thing, or
even though contrary to popular belief, there is no such thing as good people and bad people. That is making our lives too easy, right? We say, okay, there are these evil people, and then we start a war against them. But actually, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes positive and sometimes negative motives. The only thing we can do is these two things: think about it better, right? What is it that really matters in my life? What is it that I should be doing? Think about it better, which is what I'm trying to contribute to. And the second thing is be able to actually do that, right? So not to give in to them temptation, the baklava in your case, or the money, the envelope with the money inside, or something like that, right? So that these two things, so ethical reflection and ethical motivation, are these two things. I saw lots of interesting questions in there. I thought in the poll, I thought one question which I liked was the question: should I befriend someone even though I don't like them? Right? For my own
that was my question, Vincent.
For my own benefit. Yes. Oh, okay, good. So yes, I think that's a very interesting question, because it has to do with your personal integrity. Okay. So one thing I always say is it's really important what you think of the person in the mirror. Okay, so you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning. What do you think about that person? That's for your happiness. This is hugely important, right? If you think that person makes lots of money, but you think of him as a crook, then you won't really be happy. You'll be a rich crook, right? That's it. So I think in these cases, the important thing is to realize very well what it is that you are doing, and to try and be honest about this to yourself, at least. It is problematic to befriend somebody just for some kind of aim, because as Immanuel Kant would say, what you do there is you're using the other person as a means to an end. So what he says is, you should always respect other humans and treat other humans as an end in themselves, as something that has value in itself. Okay, so if you just use this other person because you think you're going to gain something out of them, then you're not doing this. You're not respecting them as a person, you're using them as a tool, basically. Okay, so
utilitarian use. Yeah.
Yes, for the consequences, right, that you're trying to achieve. What I think you should try to make sure in these cases is that you don't, or at least you minimize the deception on the person. Okay, so if you go to them and say, we're friends, we go out for drinks, blah, blah, blah, and you sort of make a whole story about that because you're trying to achieve something, you're manipulating this other person. Okay, and if they found out, they'll be really angry, and for good reason. Whereas, of course, there are lots of relationships which are not like that. You have a relationship with colleagues where you know that you're not particularly good friends or something, but you do a job, okay, and the other person does a job, and that's fine. We can work like that. I just used a taxi driver, okay? I mean, he's not my friend. He's driving the taxi. I pay him. That's it, okay? So yes, I respect him as a person. So I did chat a little bit with him as a person, but mainly I use him to achieve a certain end. So that is fine as long as we know that that's what we're doing, right? It's when the deception comes in, that's where the problem occurs, it seems to me, right?
I also want to address a question which is a bit more practical, since we're talking about Horizon and projects.
Yes.
Can a problem within a project regarding ethical issues which might not affect the excellence of a project, lead to rejection of the project at all? Yes, it can.
Yes, yeah, the answer is yes.
It can.
Right.
There were cases where the proposal was successful and the researchers were not able to address certain ethical issues related, for instance, with privacy of patients in health projects. And the project was not able to start with the methodology that the researchers had suggested. So they had to change the whole approach and the whole methodology for the project to start. So it's not a rejection.
I have a practical example of that. I was in the evaluation. I was in the evaluation system of a robotics call some years ago, and there was a proposal there which suggested some smart home systems for the elderly, which would be able to detect certain things which would happen in the home. For example, if somebody falls down, if somebody doesn't move very much, and so on, right? And the people who proposed this, they were very interesting proposals, but they hadn't thought of the question, who would have access to this data? And where it would be stored, whether it would be stored at all, because in this case, there was no reason to store it, right? The person was moving around, okay, that's their private business. It's only relevant if the person, for example, falls down or something like that happens. So the proposal, and I asked, guys, what do you think? Did they think about this? And they did not think about this at all. And this was one of the major weaknesses that led to this proposal never being funded, because they said they'd only thought about the technical problem and never broadened it to, right, what matters here. And obviously, that's a huge mistake. So yes, that can lead to rejection, indeed.
That's exactly why you need a more multidisciplinary approach into your research, and why you need to involve ethical experts, ethics experts, and or even societal scientists to the overall mix.
Yes, even though that sounds like a bad tactic for me, I think you could involve experts on this, but the main thing is that you yourself should reflect on what you're doing.
Oh yes,
okay.
Of course.
So if you can say, what is it that I'm doing, and I'm going back to the slogan, what is the science and society benefit of what I'm doing? Okay, if you can properly reflect on that, and of course you're the expert on the technology, right? So you know that better than anyone else. Then I think that's the major step. You can show that you've done this reflection. I think that is the really crucial thing. If you just go and do your technology and God help us, that is where the difficulty occurs, it seems to me, exactly. And you can see this very clearly in lots of areas of science that the European Commission is very strongly pushing now towards saying, okay, yes, we need technologies, that's all to the benefit of humanity, but when are they to the benefit of humanity, right? Because ultimately, I say this again, they're not funding science or research. They're funding stuff that's beneficial to science and society. If it's not beneficial, even if it is a huge advantage technology, it won't fly, okay? And that is very, very obvious in all sorts of areas. And in the area that I'm working on, mostly AI, it is now very clear the Commission is trying hard to find ways to evaluate what is beneficial to society there, because they are worried.
Yes,
right?
Yes, indeed. We have another question. I found that interesting. Unfortunately, there are so many questions. We are trying to pick some that are more relevant and comprehensive. Now, the title of this session includes both ethics and integrity. I would like to learn more I would like to learn about how your perception of these two terms specifically relating to research ethics and academic integrity.
That is a deceptively simple and really difficult question, actually. Okay, let me see whether I can try to do this. So I tried to explain that ethics is about what I should do. Okay, so it's about actions. Integrity is something that's typically called personal integrity. So it is about a person, and essentially integrity means something like that the person is a fitting whole thing. It matches, so to speak. So integrity, I think, essentially means that you as a person have reflected properly on the ethical problems and you have taken a position on that. So which might not agree with someone else's position on this, right? So I could, let's say, respect somebody. Oh no, since let's say we're looking at a cultural difference, okay? So let's say I meet a very traditional father of somebody in a countryside place in Turkey who takes the view that his daughters should not go out with anybody except close family members and should cover their heads, okay? I don't agree with that. In my culture, that's not how things are done. But I would say this person, let's say I discuss with this person and say, why do you do this? And they explain to me what they think is important about the respect for women. And I can see that they have a well-reflected position on why they think this is important. And this is, for example, less important than personal freedom of these girls. And therefore, the whole system is complete. He has integrity. Okay, so that is, I think, something that I should respect, right? So it's different from somebody just saying, I don't care what you say, liberty is not important. No, that would be wrong. Liberty is important, right? But you can say liberty is less important than this other thing, which I think is really important, the respect towards the societal position of a woman or something like this, and say, this is more important. And so my reflection says, that on balance, I think I should now do this, right? Every parent restricts their children, right? To some extent, right? So the question is how you do this and why you do this in your cultural situation. So I think integrity is the personal characteristic of ethics. So I think it's really important, and in the question that Odysseus asked earlier about the using of personal relationships and so on. That's, I think, exactly a question of integrity, right? If I discovered that Odysseus is doing that, he's being nice with me because he's trying to get something out of me, I would dislike him for that, right? Because I would say that's not integrity. You're missing something in your ethical setup. If you can say, yes, I need somebody like you for my seminars, right? And I want, obviously, I'll be nice and polite with you for that reason. That's fine. Right? Then we know what we're at, and we can do that with personal integrity. So it seems to me that is personal integrity, in my view, is the fundamental notion of ethics. This is really what's the most important thing. That has to do with the mirror, right? You look at the mirror, the guy or woman in the mirror in the morning, and you like them or you don't. That's what matters.
So I will close with a follow-up because that's interesting. We refer to the individual integrity. But we mainly, when we deal with projects, we talk about institutional academic integrity policies, right? So how do we deal with them?
Right. So academic integrity is a bit of a misnomer. It's because what it does is it's trying to say, as an academic, there are certain things which I expect from you as a proper academic, if you have integrity as an academic. So, for example, not to falsify your experiments, right? You want your experiments to come out in this way that, I don't know, the readings are around 5 and they turn out to be all over the place, and you sort of push them in the database and you make them look around 5. That's not integrity. So The difficulty about this is that when you say you want your scientists to have integrity, then you start making rules. Okay, and then you say, aha, you should. I do this in my classes, right? I said, if you cite other people's work, if you use other people's works, you have to cite them, right? And so on. So, but really, these rules for academic integrity are just a sort of crutch to get to what really matters, you see? So when I have a discussion with a student whether something is plagiarism or not, what I really am interested in is whether they've understood why this is important. It's important because plagiarism is deception, right? You're cheating the person who's reading this. You're pretending this is my work, but it's not your work, okay? So that's what's wrong with it. If somebody has understood that, I think that's the core of it. So really, we have rules like that in all universities and so on. There are integrity, rules of scientific integrity, academic integrity. But typically, what really matters is whether people have understood what being a good academic is. So I personally like to put ethics in terms of as saying that it's a science of being good, right? So that's all very old-fashioned stuff. Aristotle said that that's what all of that is about. So if you think of good as the term, then you could just say, use the word good and add whichever term is relevant to you, right? So good academic, good engineer, good scientist, good businessman or something like that. And yes, a good businessman has a different characteristic from a good academic, right? But a good businessman, for example, is also smart enough not to cheat his collaborators because he wants to cooperate with them next time. So that's what I think you should think about. So it's I think a very common thing in many places to ask yourself, are you a good person? So that's what integrity is. If you can say, yes, I'm a good person. And as I think Diamandis suggested, it's always a project, right? It's not something that you become a good person, then you're done with that and you're finished. It's an ongoing project.
You don't graduate.
No, it's an ongoing project that will last your entire life, right?
Actually, in many cases, especially for the IT industry, we are used that we build a demonstrator or a prototype that is very fragile, so it can be used only for very specific special conditions, but we promote it and advertise it like it is applicable, which means that, again, there is some issue of integrity. And
Absolutely.
In many cases, it's the individual person's integrity, but it's also the corporate organizational's integrity. And in many cases, this is a symptom that is like a disease that in order to have successful academics, researchers, or in the corporate world, people who bring funding, organizations set the bar lower and they prefer to not learn about specifics or to not cause problems to people who are supposed to have the golden paths. And then at some point, there is something that happens and people find out that there was not so good the practice that this person or a research unit or a group there were employing, and then they try to show that they are surprised, and then they introduce some committees or some task force to find out what was the reason, though they all knew very well what it was about. But yeah, it's also, I think that the example also that Professor Muller used before, it is very, very relevant, and it's very accurate in this respect. Yeah.
It's I should say I'm a little bit, as usual, I suspect, a bit more optimistic about this than you are. So I think, for example, the example that you mentioned is, everybody in IT knows that, right? There is a bit of puffery going on, right? You present this thing, you say, it solves all the problems, and it's really quite brittle, and it will often just work in a relatively confined environment. The thing is, the other people to whom you're presenting this also know that, right? So they know that you're overstating things a little bit. So it's a bit like, a shop that says, we have the best kebab or something like that. This is the best. There is one in Thessaloniki that says we have the best gyros in the world or something like this. Okay, you know that you don't really want to take that seriously. You're not actually deceiving anybody by saying this. It is a bit over the top, but in the communication that we have, we know what we're at. So I think that is exactly the question, whether you have actual deception going on. So in some of these cases, there is actual deception going on, right? But in some of these cases, you will just have the communication, which happens to be the habitual thing in this area. And I think maybe we coming back to projects, that applies in project proposals too. Okay, in project proposals, there is sort of proposal prose, right? There is a way to write proposals. And everybody knows to some extent that these things are made to look a little better than they actually are. So you who writes it, the people who review it, everybody knows that that's the game, okay? So it doesn't really matter all that much. What matters is if you're trying to overdo it in such a way that you are trying to deceive the people who are doing the evaluation, who are people like you, right? Then I think it becomes problematic. And if I catch you doing this, they'll hit you over the head hard. Okay. I'm not sure. Yes, Odysseus, where are we going to go with the time?
I think we should take a short break, 10 minutes, to allow some people to get up from the chairs and get a coffee maybe, and we can continue with your second presentation and then go to Diamantis.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So we meet in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes.
10 minutes break, Kemal.
Okay, thank you very much.
Apologies, I'm here. Odysseas, can you tell me a bit what the plan is with the rest of the day, so to speak?
Are we ready, Vincent?
Yeah,
I've sent you a message. Can you see it? Can you send chat?
yes. So remind me what the plan is. So we're supposed to start this part of the session officially at 3:40. It's now 3:30. Odysseas and Diamandis, right? And before that, I was supposed to do a little bit on AI ethics or digital ethics.
Yes.
I'm happy for you to do whatever you think is best. I can skip that part if you want entirely.
No, I don't want you to skip it.
I can do it quickly or something like that. I will, yeah.
If it would be okay for you, I could have my presentation, and then I will also try to keep it short, so I will not expect that there will be any questions there, and so that you can then start your presentation, Vincent, so that we are sure that we will not be unable to have me because I have this time limit. Yeah.
What is your time limit?
2:30 CET, so 4:30 Turkish time.
Yes, but that applies to both of us, right? Because then Banu Boruk is going to speak.
Odysseas, what would you suggest?
We should both of us should be finished by 4:30 Turkish time.
If it's okay, I mean, I don't know, we can keep the agenda if Vincent manages to finish it. Let's say, I don't know, how long do you need, Diamandis? 20 minutes?
20 minutes is okay, and I could even need less than 20 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Vincent, are you okay with half an hour?
Yeah, I will suggest I'll try to do 20 minutes, and then we'll see where it goes.
Perfect.
Okay.
We'll have questions after the presentation. So we'll start with you, then we'll follow up with Diamandis, and we can take questions later on and the discussion later on. Okay.
So let's try and do that. So I will share my screen then. Good. All right. So the idea was that I would, after this relatively general story about what ethics is and how to incorporate it into these projects, I would have a little look at a particular area of ethics and technology that I work on, and so here is that area. So I work partially on ethics of AI and robotics. I've written a survey article, the first survey article actually that existed on this topic. It's online, as you can see there. It's called Ethics of AI and Robotics, and it's in something called the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is a very prominent place for philosophers anyway. And there I tried to put a little bit of a structure into that discussion. So there is a lot of discussion about AI and ethics and robotics and ethics. We should do something, but what are the problems and how can we even talk about them in some kind of academically respectable way? So a lot of the talk that is there really, I think, has a lot to do with being afraid of new technologies. A lot of the talk has to do with being afraid of bad use of AI. I don't know, for bank robbery and so on, which I think is not an ethical problem. So we know what we think about bank robbery, right? It's illegal for good reason, and we don't want people to do it. And it doesn't matter whether you do the bank robbery with an IT system or by going into the bank with a machine gun. Okay, so these are not the problems I want to talk about. I think they're ethically completely uninteresting. The interesting ones are the ones where we have some kind of conflict between various things that we want to achieve and see whether we can achieve all of those. And I suggested in this article the basic structure that these problems fall into several categories, essentially 3 categories, namely problems that have to do with data, problems that have to do with the epistemology of data. Epistemology is the philosophically polite word for knowledge. So in other words, what you can and cannot know. And problems that have to do with robot ethics, specifically with robots as opposed to software systems in AI. And then there are some problems which are of a more theoretical nature, which philosophers are very deeply interested in. So what does all of this mean for various important concepts in this context, in particular for concepts like being a moral agent, be responsible for your actions, being autonomous, and so on. And then finally, there is the discussion about superintelligence and the idea that perhaps the robots will get smarter than us, and that produces a threat for humanity, which I think is also worth talking about. So if you're interested in AI ethics, I recommend that you read this dubious article of mine. So because today we don't have a huge amount of time, I will just sort of give you a sample of a couple of the problems that occur in there. One problem is the data problem that I think is related to AI. It's not directly an AI problem, but it's certainly an IT problem. And I think it is arguably the biggest problem, ethical problem in our present day, because it's a problem that occurred with new technologies that allow us to do new things, and we really don't have a clue whether we want these things and whether we should have these things. So I think things have changed in an absolutely dramatic way over the last couple of decades in that regard. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, just remember how things used to be when you were small, or even before that, depending on how old you are, when you used to communicate with people before the digital age. What would you do? Well, you would speak to them, typical way, right? And do other things when you were personally in contact with them. Or you would write letters. You remember letters, I suppose, right? When is the last time you've written a letter? It's been a while, probably. And you would make phone calls. And phone calls were over analog telephone lines. Okay, so when somebody wanted to survey what you're doing, they would have to either run after you personally, right? So to be there when you speak, for example, with someone else, or have a microphone where you are speaking, so physically in the location where that happens. They would have to intercept your letters, open them, read them, and put them back in. And they would have to intercept your phone calls, which actually meant connecting to a cable through which this data is flowing. And again, that would mean pay somebody who sits there and listens to your phone conversations. Okay, extremely tedious business, very expensive, impossible to do in scale. So you could only do it if you had a lot of money at your disposal and very strong motives for doing this. So the state was largely doing this, and only a very select number of people whom they thought are important to survey for, because they think they're criminals, because they think they're politically dangerous, and so on. Okay. This has changed completely, I would say, So this has changed. Why? Because I think the bullet points here is upside down. First of all the classical data is now digital data. So everything that we used to have on paper, all this data for banks, governments, insurances, medical data, and so on, it's now digital data, right? So there's things that data already existed in the old days, but it's now all digital. More than that, everything that you do in your life, or a very, very large amount of what you do, is already digital in itself. So what we're doing now is digital, okay? Phone calls are now digital. Your mobile phone is, of course, a digital device, and everything you do on there is digital. So your life is already largely digital. But it's worse than that. It's not just that your life is digital. The things that aren't digital about your life, right? What you eat, what your body does, what you say to somebody directly, is subject to sensing. So we have all sorts of sensors in the world, and they're increasing in enormous proportions. Your mobile phone is full of various kinds of sensors. And these sensors are things that turn the analog world in which we live, to some extent, into digital data. So basically, all of your life is now, to some extent, digital data. That is completely different from the way it was only a couple of decades ago. And that means that all of your life is now accessible to data analysis through AI and so on. So you have to make sure this data is not stored, is not accessible to various people, and so on. So this is a completely different situation from the situation that we used to have. And now, if somebody has access to your mobile phone, for example, a Secret Service, and you're not paying any particular attention anyway, they know everything about you. They know whom you're speaking with, whom you're meeting, where you are at any given time, everything, okay? So that's completely different from the way it used to be. And they can do this automatically. They can do it with computers. They don't have to send someone to watch you. So this is done on a very, very big scale now, because of course the people who've always done it are really happy that there is now this opportunity. And there are lots of other agents that didn't used to do it, but are now doing it because of profit, okay? So one example of that is what's happening on the internet. So as Bruce Schneier says, surveillance is the business model of the internet. So surveillance was something that state agencies and certain private agencies were doing sometimes. Surveillance is now the basic model of what the internet does. The basic businesses on the internet, like Google, Facebook, and Amazon, and so on, who offer their services and often offer their services for free, offer these services because they want your data. So I think it is really important to see that this data economy is a completely different situation from the way the economy used to work quite recently. And it opens up a very large space, essentially for manipulation. So it's a long story, but essentially the reason why private companies want your data is because they want your money. So in other words, they want you to spend your money in such a way that it is beneficial to them. There is more to that, but that's sort of the basic idea. So it's very different from a state surveillance system, okay? So it has economic aims. Thinking back to what we said before, there is a real question whether that is in the benefit of society. And very often it's not. It's just because it's now possible, right? So Google understood at some point that it's possible to make a search engine and not charge people for it and not have advertisement on it, because the data is what has value, okay? So do they tell you this? No, they don't. Do they tell you what they know about you? No, they don't. But they try to get more and more data out of you. So they give you a free operating system for your phone, right? Called Android. They give you a browser for free. They give you email for free. Okay, what do they want? They want your data. And they do get your data. Even if you're not using these products, they're still getting your data, less, but they're still getting it. So there is a very serious issue there, whether that is to the benefit of society. And there is a very serious issue about this, in the sense that it is manipulation, which is ethically problematic, and it's deception, because you're not telling us that that's what's going and that's what's happening, right? So this whole sphere is full of really dubious ethical behavior and extremely annoying, I would say. So that's one area that I want to talk about. I won't talk about opacity and bias, which I already mentioned, or sex, even though sex is always good. There's another thing which I want to talk about, which I think might be relevant for your calls, which is the effects of automation on employment. So essentially, whenever you're automating something, what you're doing is you're increasing the productivity of someone. So the gentleman there on the left who's digging in some kind of field is probably doing something very nice and useful, but very likely what he does could be done with a machine more efficiently. So, or if you want to have somebody dig a hole in the garden, you can have two people with shovels digging the hole in the garden, or you can have somebody come with a mechanical digger that digs the same hole in a couple of minutes, but has to pay for the machine. So what happens is that the guy who runs the digger, who sits in the digger and does that, has higher productivity than the people with a shovel, okay? So that is, the result is that you need more capital, okay? It's economics 101, but less workforce to do this, okay? This is something that happens continuously throughout industrialization. In the European Union, for example, we had about 60% of people employed in farming in 1800, and now it's less than 5%, right? So because, of course, farming is now so much mechanized that the productivity is way, way higher. Usually, this is not a bad thing, because usually what happens is that these people don't necessarily lose their jobs, but they become more productive, make more money by doing what they're doing, and some people will just do something else. So there is overall a productivity gain in society, which means there is a wealth gain in society. Okay, so if you distribute this wealth gain properly, then you're having a positive result for everybody. The question is whether AI is different. So this only works if you have productivity gains and then people do different jobs and more jobs are being created, right? So if more jobs are being created, which didn't exist previously, like the job of the lady on the bottom there with her laptop, if that's what's happening, then you're fine. It might not be the same this time. So what we've been doing so far with automation is that we basically automated what in US English is called blue collar workers. Okay, so white collar workers are the guys who work in the offices, and blue collar workers are the people who work with their hands, like the gentleman on the left. So these people's work has mostly been automated to a very large extent now. And we sort of got used to this. People who work with their hands don't make a lot of money. Their productivity is typically quite low. People who work intellectually, mostly white collar workers, are making more money. They have higher productivity. But now the automation is going to hit the white collar workers. In other words, people like you and me. Okay, our jobs are on the line. And the question is whether we can continue with the same system as we had before. Productivity gain, everybody gets richer, we redistribute, and we're fine. So I will, So the question really is it different this time or is it the same? If it's the same, basically we're fine. We're going to get richer as a society, and that's all right. There are indications that that's not the case. So Martin Goos, who's been working on this very nicely, in my opinion, has said that there is now a dumbbell market. So a dumbbell, if you don't know that, is this kind of weight that you use in a gym. So it has a weight, is sort of thick on both ends and has a handle in the middle. Okay, so the dumbbell market means that the labor market gets squeezed in the middle. So you have a couple, excuse me. you have a market that gets squeezed in the middle. So you have a couple of people who do relatively low-skilled jobs. The person who serves you the coffee, and who works in a hotel and things like that. And you have a couple of people who do high-skilled jobs, hopefully you and me, if we're lucky. But the people in the middle, the ordinary office worker type, for example, gets squeezed out. So there is a very interesting problem whether that is going to be the result of automation, AI automation on employment. That's a societal problem. Okay, so when you're making your proposal, you should try to address this question: what effect is this going to have on society? Is it going to be a positive effect overall, or is it just going to make some people richer, which would not be a good thing? Okay. Good. The other thing I wanted to look at is actually machine ethics. So, and I want to do this because I think it's important to get rid of a misunderstanding. So there is a problem in AI ethics, which is what we should do with AI. That is a human ethics problem, okay? Which is not different from what Diamandis earlier said about how to use a knife, okay? A knife is a tool. You can use it for good and bad ends. And our question is how to make tools that support using them in a good way, so not the hidden knife in the stick. And the other objects, how to use them properly. In AI ethics, there is one other area, which is the ethics for the machine itself. So what should the machine do? So in the case that I have here on the picture, that's from Alan Winfield's research on robotics, the thing in the middle, the round thing, is a hole. So here's a robot that can walk, is in position A, it can walk to position B, C, or D. And there's a human who walks towards the left. So what should the robot do? Winfield says it's important that the robot realize that if it goes into C, it falls into a hole, that would be self-destruction. If it goes to B, it will be fine, but the human will fall into the hole. So it would be better to go to D and prevent the human from falling into the hole. That is what's called machine ethics. So machine ethics is the ethics for the machines. But what I find really important here is to realize this: most of AI ethics, almost all of AI ethics, is not machine ethics. It's ethics for humans that deal with machines. Okay, so classic AI machine ethics defined by Jim Moore, that's the gentleman there on the left, says we have various kinds of agents that have ethical impact. But the crucial bit is here the third point. Full ethical agents that can make ethical judgments and is competent to reasonably justify them. So if you have an ethical agent like that, then they are responsible for their actions. Okay. So, but it's very important to realize that we don't have ethical agents like that, artificial ethical agents. You and me are like this. We can do stuff, we can justify what we do, and we are responsible for our actions. Machines that we have and that we know of in the near future do not have this feature. Okay, so there's really not a machine ethics properly speaking. There is an ethics for the design and the use of machines. That's point one at the bottom. And there is a hypothetical ethics for autonomous moral agents, but there are no autonomous moral agents. Okay, so we should not confuse AI ethics with machine ethics. AI ethics is very largely concerned with the question of ethics for the design and use of the machines. So it is ethics for you as a person and not for some kind of machinery. Okay, I think I will leave it to that. So to recapitulate, I'm suggesting societal responsibility is important for these discussions. So for example, impact on the labor market. And I'm also suggesting that your personal responsibility as an agent is important in this context and not the ethics for the machines. So I think there is quite a lot of misunderstanding about what machine ethics and AI ethics are, and AI ethics is very largely not machine ethics. That's what I would like to say about this.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
This distinction is quite important, and we seem to oversee it mostly because we believe that the main idea is to set up rules for AI.
Yes, it seems to me that indeed that's a mistake. But
Yeah.
even if you look, even if you set up rules for AI, this will not be classical machine ethics. You see, so if you say, let's say you have a data collection system and you put a rule in there which says if I haven't accessed this data in the last 10 days, then delete it. Okay. Or if the conversation has this content, then stop listening or something like that. That is actually your ethical choice on your technical system.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
You're just reflecting your own choices to the machine.
Right. You have your own choices or your science and society benefit, which, as you said in the beginning, you try to make sure that your system has this science and society benefit. That's what you should care about. And that doesn't mean that you have to put the ethics into the machine or something like that. The machine has to reflect your ethics, like everything else.
Yes. Thank you, Vincent. We are going to, I see that we have a few questions, but I would like Diamantis to finish with his presentation before we go to the final question session.
Thank you, Odysseus. And first of all, a part that we missed was to introduce Professor Muller with some biographical information. I'm sure that you can Google his name and find it out, but I think that it would be important to do it also here and now. And Odysseus, when he gave the floor to Professor Muller, he said that he's an authority in his field. And sometimes we say something like this to flatter people. But I think that today, when Odysseus mentioned this, it was very factual. And few information about Professor Muller is that he was selected for the Humboldt professorship in Germany. And as a Humboldt professor at the Friedrich Alexander University, he will aim to build a bridge between technical and humanities. And this will be beyond the university boundaries. And he's expected to build a new international and interdisciplinary center for philosophy and AI research, which is to become the hub of the AI philosophy at the Friedrich Alexander University in Germany. And some other biographical information is that he's currently professor in the philosophy and ethics group at the Technical University of Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And he has received his doctorate from the University of Hamburg, and he then became a professor in the Anatolia College in Thessaloniki in Greece, where I had also the honor and the good luck to meet him back in 2007 or 2006.
The antiquity sometimes, yeah.
But so it's really an honor to have you with us, Vincent. Now I share my screen, and I will show the slides that I have prepared. These are not as important things as the ones. No, I think that I'm sharing now my whiteboard and not my screen.
Yes, it was white. I was about to say that.
It was my whiteboard. So I hope you now see my slides and my screen, and it's about earthy things. So nothing.
It's not in presentation mode yet.
Not in presentation. Now it should be in presentation mode.
It's not. I can see the slides, but it's not in presentation mode yet. I can see you're pressing the button, but nothing happens on my end.
But at least you can see that I'm changing the slides. Yeah.
Or no. It's not in presentation mode. We can see it, but it's not in presentation mode.
I think you have to stop sharing it, put the presentation in presentation mode, and then share it.
Okay, I will do like you say. And now I'm unable to share it because I'm in presentation mode. This is
you go back. You go back to Zoom, the Zoom app.
And now it works.
Same story. We see the slide. We see the
Okay,
slide, but
perhaps
not in presentation mode.
yeah.
Can you show the second slide? Does that work?
Yeah, let's see. Here you can see it.
Yes, but you just
But
have to
not-
make it bigger there at
Yeah,
the bottom. There is a
click there. Click there.
Now it is okay. You can see it.
no.
By the way, it's the first time that something like this happens, and because time is running, Kemal,
Yeah.
would you like to take control over my slides? And
If you make them bigger, quite simply, it says 50% there. If you make them larger, I think that would work fine. Oh, that is
No, Kemal has it.
okay.
Kemal has it.
Kemal took over.
Kemal is the
I'm
expert.
very happy. I'm very happy.
Yes.
So now we have only to synchronize. So go back one slide. I will tell you when there are animations also, so that you may need to push once. So it's about handling ethics in Horizon Europe proposals. So it's very practical things, nothing philosophical or open-ended. Next slide, please. And one good question is, where do ethics and ethics relevant issues appear in the proposal, so that we see exactly the places? So Kemal, now you can start. So there are in the administrative forms, there are some declarations that we have to make. Yes, Kemal. And it appears at the beginning that we have to declare that the proposal complies with ethical principles. So there, all people who aim to submit successfully a proposal have to tick this box. Go on. And then it is a specific section in the administrative forms which are about ethics and security. And there are several questions there. And people, if they say no, they don't have to declare anything and provide any additional information. But usually there are aspects related to ethics. By the way, what I'm now showing you comes from a real proposal that has been also recently submitted in the calls of September 2021. So it was before 3 months. And so it's not a hypothetical textbook scenario. So it's a real case. And as you see, about involvement of humans, the question was whether this activity, the proposal, involves human participants, and the answer is yes. And they have also to provide some specific pages. And then it comes up with specific questions like whether they are volunteers, whether they are healthy or patients, or there are children or minors. And again, we have to provide answers. So as you see, there was again a yes, a positive answer to the first question. Kemal? Yes, please go on. Yeah. And about other questions there is about personal data, which, by the way, this proposal was a proposal related with health. But it's not personal data that are relevant only in health-related or health-relevant proposals. They can appear in almost any type of proposal. So again, you see about the personal data question, on the question of whether this activity involves processing of personal data, the answer is yes, and they have to provide some page numbers there. But in all other sub-questions there, the answer is negative. And sometimes it's very easy and straightforward whether something is yes or no. But in many cases, the people that write the proposal, they have to discuss and come up with arguments whether something is definitely, clearly yes or clearly no. On practical tips about this later. So please go on, Kemal. Yes, go on. And now, again, this is the last page with questions there. And they are mainly about involvement of environmental and health safety issues, or about involvement of non-EU countries. And yes, please go on, Kemal. And as you see, in case some activities will take place in non-EU countries, Turkey being an associate country, it's not considered to be an non-EU country. But in case of Switzerland, for instance, now they have this third country status. They have to declare, same also with UK, and they have to declare there that they are non-EU countries. And there is also a new section which asks a specific question about artificial intelligence and whether the proposal involves development, deployment, and use of artificial intelligence. Actually, currently, I think that there will be very few proposals that would answer here with a no. In case they do this, it might be only to avoid the burden of providing explanations. So please, Kemal, go on. Yeah. And after these administrative questions in the administrative part, there has to come a self-assessment part, which again, it is, please, Kemal, it is to provide a text and ground specific the ethical dimension of the project's objectives, the methodology, and the impact that it will have. Now, what I wanted to tell you is that, I will mention it also later, is that the risk here is to provide some text which will be blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, with generalities. And this is not the case. So this should be avoided. So the little text that you will have to put here has to be very well prepared, grounded, which means that it might need that you will dedicate 2 full days of more than one people to cope with this. Otherwise, you may have something which will be very weak and not very convincing. And in this case, there is no need that you prepare a very well prepared, technically sound proposal and then fail to something that could be regarded as details, but it's very important. So please, Kemal, go on to the next. Now, the next question is that after having presented the relevance, we have to show that there will be some compliance with ethical principles and relevant legislations. Now, again, here, one has to provide some text. And please go on to the next slide. And as you see, I have marked everything black so that you could not see there which cases and which countries and we are related to. But as you see there, it had to be grounded to the specific legislation and regulations in the different countries where pilots and use cases will take place, which means that, again, it's not something that one can copy paste some text about GDPR or about the importance of privacy and how sensitive data will be dealt with by copying some communications of the Commission from past years. So it has to be specific and focused exactly to the countries and to the use cases. Yes, please, Kemal. And another novelty which appears now in the Horizon Europe in contrast to the Horizon 2020 is that now we have, please, Kemal, we have one, yeah, we have one specific type, yes, Kemal, a specific type of deliverables. So deliverables in the past were either demonstrators or prototypes or reports. And now we have deliverables which can be classified, identified as ethics. And of course, there again, such an ethics deliverable can be again a report or can be a data set or a data management plan that describes how we are going to deal with ethics data that we will acquire. But again, anything that will be related with ethics will be identified as an ethics deliverable regarding its type. Okay, please, Kemal. And some things that are worth to know. Does this activity involve human participants? Again, as you remember, this was a question. We had to provide some pages. Please go on, Kemal, now. Yeah, and again, and about the personal data. So again, you see there that we have to mention pages where we will describe in detail how we deal with these issues. Please go on, Kemal. And now a good question is which page numbers should we mention? Please, Kemal. It's about the first time that an ethics relevant issue appears in the text, the first time that it is mentioned, or the first time that it is presented, described in detail. And we can, of course, do all the above because there is the possibility that we, instead of mentioning one single page or a range of pages, so between page 3 and 5, we can mention page 3, comma, page 12, comma, page 25. But again, the idea there is that we may provide the outline of what our project deals with in page 2. But we will go more in detail. Actually, we will mention what the issue is relatively later in the proposal. So try to choose there not the first page that it might be somehow mentioned, but the first time that you provide some good description about the ethics aspect of your proposal or your use cases or your work. So this is not so trivial. So again, it needs that people will handle it after giving it some good thought. Please, Kemal. So this is what I mentioned, yeah, and that you have all these 3 options. Yes, please. So some mistakes to avoid. First, yeah, to come up with generalities, and especially if they are generic, which is usually the case. Why? The reason is that people will simply ignore this. It will be very weak. Now Kemal is running faster than me, but it's okay, Kemal, there is no worry. It's better than repeating and asking you to go on. So you can, yeah. So the thing with generality is that they might give us a feeling like we have done our duty, we have provided some text, but the text will be very weak, which means that in case it will not even excite the evaluators to give negative points there, it will not help us at all. So in this respect, anything that is a generality, please, it should be avoided. So anything has to be relevant with the proposal, the specific idea, the concept, the specific partners and use case. The second practice is that, okay, we might say ethics are a very side issue, peripheral issue. Let's copy paste some sections from some past proposals. And sometimes also with totally unrelated content names. So you may have a project that dealt with e-commerce in or tourism, and then you think that, okay, it's still a good idea to copy paste some parts that seem to me very relevant also for a health proposal, or do the opposite. Again, copy paste is a practice that is widely used. It is supposedly saving us time, but the thing is that one, even in case you think there that, okay, let's copy paste from some previous proposal, you may think that you save some time, but you will need to adapt the parts that you copied and pasted and make them relevant, update them, which means that at the end you will end up needing too much time on customization. And sometimes it is worth to start from a 0 point than copy paste. But if psychologically you feel more comfortable to copy paste and then put these efforts on customizing and adapting it, then please do it. But it's no way that you would avoid the customization. Okay. And the third part, and then, okay, please continue there. Yeah. It's about copy paste from reports, policy papers, communication. So we can copy there. We have a plethora of documents about AI guidelines, policy papers from consultancy companies, from the commission, high-level advisory groups about anything. And then we might copy paste things. This is something that is all worth to do, to use these as background bibliography, but each consortium has to build their own narrative, which means that, again, I have nothing against you to build your own, let's say, repository of reports, but then one has to study them and build a narrative out of it. What usually happens is that people copy paste different things and they put them together and they see there if there is some need, some cute way to make bridge statements from the one paragraph to the other. But this is very weak for someone who will read it as an evaluator, which again, it's not a good practice. Okay, so please come out. So otherwise it should be avoided. So all in all, please come out. You need to plan early on and dedicate resources. You need to find the right person or persons to assign this as a task within your organization or within your consortium. Yeah. And it might always be a good idea to invite a specialized partner to assign this task. Yeah. And it's good also if you use the opportunity to improve your literacy on the subject. Now, I would like to make a remark about specialized partners. At some point, because of demand, consortia needed to cope with ethics aspects. Now one may find so many experts in ethics, like if you go in a forest in October where there are many mushrooms, which means that I would not, okay, it would be ideal if you would invite someone like Professor Muller, who is an authority in their field. But the thing is that try to avoid getting on board some partners who may have been specialized in doing soft tasks like exploitation, dissemination, communication, and now they have started also doing ethics. So it will really not help at all during the evaluation. So for your proposal preparation, you might feel very comfortable because, okay, we have these people who will care with Twitter accounts and Facebook and anything that will be about press release, and they will also deal with the ethics. But it will not be a good way to solve these issue. So from my side, in research institutions, there is always the opportunity that you start investing more on these aspects, which means that it might still be the case. You may not have someone who is an established professor. It might be that you have an early stage researcher, like a PhD student, who might try to take care after these issues, and it would still be good. So next slide. Yeah, and in the long run, this investment will pay off. So it's not something that will be wasting your resources. So now I have ended my presentation, so I didn't take much of your time. And for any follow-up questions you would like, please feel very comfortable to contact me by email. I will be very happy to answer any questions or help you in any way that I can. Okay, many thanks.
Thank you, Diamandis. That was a nice overview of all the practical aspects that researchers have to deal with in their proposal. You should always, of course, keep in mind that no two projects are the same. So in every situation, you need to consider how you are going to approach the ethics in your proposal, and then plan and act accordingly. In other proposals, ethics have a major role. If, for instance, we are talking about a health project where you have to deal with privacy of data, you have to deal with handling even minors in case of clinical trials. So you have to dedicate a lot of effort and think about all the issues of all the ethical issues. In other cases, the situation is more straightforward, so you can get away easier by just reflecting on some of the issues that Vincent mentioned about, and if you need to consider something in more detail. Now, before we go to questions,
something only
yes,
that I see now a comment, a correction that I received from Firat. Many thanks, Firat, for this. That he mentions that although Turkey is an associate country, it is considered as a non-EU country in the ethics section of the proposal, which is, yes, I agree, it is sad, but it is true, which means that please, to all of you, correct what I mentioned before. In case you fill out the ethics part in the administrative forms, you have to be mentioned explicitly there, providing information about the case of how you are going to deal with use cases or pilots or developments in Turkey, because it is considered, unfortunately, as a non-EU country, because the association is not actually as strong to justify that you are excused of not having to declare this. So many thanks, Firat.
Thank you, Diamandis. I think it's time to give the floor to the Turkish voice and maybe share another perspective or another way of dealing with things. So we have with us Professor Banu Burak. She's an assistant professor in TÜBİTAK ETU, and she's an expert in ethics in health research. So I would very much love to listen how you deal with ethics in your field, Banu.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here attending this webinar, and I'm very pleased to listen to the previous panelists, especially Vincent, because he is also working on the subjects that I'm also studying, especially AI ethics. AI ethics is the study topics among my study areas. So I would like to talk more about AI ethics, but today I'm assigned here to talk more about research ethics in health area. So my presentation will focus on the ethical problems during the health research process, especially in Turkey. I will give references to my experiences during my presentation. By the way, I will do my presentation in Turkish because I know that my presentation will be simultaneously translated into English. And I assume that most of the participants are Turkish researchers who are planning to submit proposals to Horizon programs. So I think that my presentation in Turkish will be more effective. So let me share my slides. Oh, I'm sorry. I will do it in 1 second. You can see it in the presentation format, right? You can see the slides.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I will switch into Turkish now. Bugün biraz önce bahsettiğim gibi aslında sağlık alanındaki etik problemlerden, yani sağlık alanındaki yapılan araştırmalardaki etik problemlerden bahsedeceğim. Daha çok applied ethics konusu olacak benim bahsedeceğim şeyler. Yani çok teorik, philosophical konulara girmeyeceğim. Birazcık daha pratik bilgiler vermeye çalışacağım. Şimdi aslında bizim bu etik ve sağlık araştırmaları dediğimizde karşımıza çıkan şeyler ne? Sağlık alanında, yani Apply Ethics'in sağlık alanındaki yansımasına baktığımız zaman bir sürü farklı etik alanını görüyoruz. Klinik etik, araştırma etiği, sağlık etiği, bunun altında bir takım uzmanlık alanlarının etikleri. Bunların hepsinin çalışma alanları farklı. Ben birazcık bugün sunumumda araştırma etiği ve klinik etiği birleştireceğim. Yani klinik etik aslında bizim sağlık hizmeti sunarken karşılaştığımız etik problemleri içine alan konu, ama araştırma etiği içerisinde de klinik araştırmalar olduğu için bir nebze yine ikisinin biraz kesişiminden bahsediyor olacağım bugünkü sunumda. Şimdi bizim için önemli olan ne, husus ne? Biz sağlık alanından, araştırmadan ve etikten bahsediyorsak, bir kere etikten bahsediyorsak bizim araştırmalarımızda insan deneklerimizin olması, yani human subject'lerin olması lazım. Human subject olayına biraz daha derinlemesine gireceğim. Çünkü bazı araştırmaların human subject içerip içermediğine karar vermekte zorlanıyoruz. Dolayısıyla da burada bir etik problem var mı araştırma etiği açısından ya da işte insan deneklerin haklarını korumak açısından herhangi bir etik ikilemle yüz yüze miyiz? Buna karar vermekte zorlanıyoruz. Buna karar vermekte zorlandığımız zaman da hangi projelerin etik kurul incelemesine girmesi gerektiğine karar vermekte de zorlanıyoruz. Dolayısıyla araştırma, etik ve sağlık dediğimiz zaman insan deneklerden ve etik kurul incelemesinden bahsetmemiz gerekiyor. Tabii bundan önce de eğer bir insan denekleri üzerinde araştırmadan bahsediyorsak araştırma ve insan denek tanımlarını yapmamız lazım. Çok bunları tek tek okumayacağım size ama araştırma dediğimiz şey ne? Aslında bilimsel literatüre katkıda bulunmak için hazırladığımız sistematik bir çalışma. Şimdi sistematik çalışmalar dışında içinde insanlarla haşır neşir olduğumuz bazı çalışmaları araştırma olarak nitelendirmek zorunda değiliz. Dolayısıyla onlar scope dışı kalıyor. İnsan denek dediğimiz şey de insan denek, yani üzerinde araştırma yaptığımız kişi, bu araştırmayı bir profesyonel de yapıyor olabilir. Yani PhD sahibi bir uzman da yapıyor olabilir. Bir öğrenci de yapıyor olabilir. Her kim bir insan denek üzerinde araştırma yapıyorsa, bu insan denek üzerinde yapılan araştırmada birebir invazif bir müdahale içeriyor da olabilir. Ya da etkileşim yoluyla, bir takım anketler yoluyla onun fikirlerini topluyor olabiliriz. Bir takım görüntü ya da video verileri topluyor olabiliriz. Ya da bir takım biological samples topluyor olabiliriz bu kişilerden. Sonuçta farklı farklı yollarla, müdahale ve etkileşim yoluyla biz bu kişilerden veri topluyorsak ve bu verileri biz sistematik bir çalışma içerisinde kullanıyorsak, evet biz bir araştırmadaki insan denekten bahsediyoruz. Ama burada altını çizmemiz gereken önemli bir husus var. İnsan denek dediğimiz şey yaşayan kişi. Ölülere ait veriler üzerinde yapılan araştırmalarda insan denekten bahsedemiyoruz. İnsan denekten bahsetmediğimiz için etik ikilemlerden bahsedemiyoruz. Bu aslında çok gri bir alandır. Çünkü etik ikilemler vardır normalde. Yaşamayan bireylerin verileri üzerinde yapılan araştırmalarda da, ama demek istediğim şey şu: yaşamayan bireylere ait veriler üzerinde yapılan araştırmalarda bizim ülkemizde ve çoğu ülkede etik kurul iznine gerek olmuyor. Bu farklı bir etik problem. Şu an pratik sorunlardan gittiğim için ona çok girmeyeceğim. Şimdi araştırma dedik, insan denek dedik, etik kurul izni dedik. İşte sağlık alanındaki etik sorunlardan bahsediyoruz. Vincent kendi sunumunda bir herkesin kendi etik problemlerini tanımlayabileceği bir pool oluşturmuştu. Orada bazı etik problemlere baktım. Şimdi bizim sağlık alanındaki yapılan araştırmalardaki temel etik problem konularımız kimlerden aydınlatılmış onam alacağımız, yani insan deneklerden bahsediyoruz. Bazı insan denek araştırmalarında aydınlatılmış onam almamız gerekiyor. Bazılarında çok gerek kalmıyor. Yarar sağlamaya çalışıyoruz biz bu araştırmaları yaparken. İnsan deneklere, araştırmaya kattığımız insan deneklere bazen o insan deneklere yarar sağlamak zorunda değiliz. Ama sonuçta hiçbir şekilde zarar vermemeye çalışıyoruz. Biz bu kişilerin özelliklerine saygı duymaya çalışıyoruz. Yani araştırmaya dahil ettiğimiz kişilerin fikirlerine, o araştırmada gerçekten kendi özel kararlarıyla yer aldıklarına, istedikleri zaman araştırmadan çıkabileceklerine, dolayısıyla her zaman araştırmada bir B planımız olmasına, insan denek havuzumuzun her zaman böyle kıtı kıtına değil, ayrılabilecek denekleri de göz önünde bulundurarak ona göre bir istatistik sayı belirlenmesine dikkat ediyoruz. Etik ve insan denek dediğimiz zaman gizlilik ve mahremiyet konuları asla vazgeçemeyeceğimiz konular. Bunlarla ilgili privacy ve confidentiality aslında çok karışan kavramlar Türkçe'de. Çünkü gizlilik ve mahremiyet sanki birbirinin eş anlamlısı gibi, ama bir sonraki slaytta onların arasındaki farka değineceğim. Çünkü bir nebze olsun önemli. Biz ne yapmaya çalışıyoruz bir de araştırmalarda? Yani olabildiğince zararı minimize etmeye çalışıyoruz. İnsan deneye verdiğimiz zararı minimize etmeye çalışıyoruz. Bir de tabii ki de fair subject selection yapmaya çalışıyoruz. Yani sadece belirli bir gruptan değil, olabildiğince tabii ki de araştırma sorunumuza spesifik olarak heterojen bir grup oluşturmaya çalışıyoruz. Sadece gidip belirli bir etnik kökenden insan üzerinde bir klinik araştırma yapmıyoruz mesela. Eğer o çalıştığımız hastalık sadece o etnik kökene özel bir hastalık değilse, atıyorum. Yani adaletli denek seçimi de yine bizim sağlık araştırmalarındaki karşılaştığımız etik sorunlardan biri. Gizlilik ve mahremiyete dönersem, o privacy ve confidentiality issue'lar, Gizlilik dediğimiz şey aslında insanlarla ilgili olan bir şey. Yani gizlilik verilerin bir niteliği değil, öznelerin bir niteliği ve biz gizliliği korumaya çalışırız. Mahremiyet dediğimiz şey ise verilerle ilgili olan bir şey. Öznelerle değil, verilerin özelliği olan bir şey. Dolayısıyla da biz mahremiyeti sağlamaya çalışıyoruz araştırmalarda. Pardon, şunu bir kapamam lazım. Kendi slaytlarımı rahat göremiyorum çünkü. Okay. Gizlilik dediğimiz şey, kişilerin kendilerine ve bilgilerine erişimini kontrol eden kişilerin hak ve çıkarlarını ifade ediyor. Yani bir kişinin gizlilik sorularına nasıl tepki vereceği durumu da aslında bu tanıma göre öznenin kültürüne, yaşına ve etnik kökenine göre değişiyor. Onun için etik sorunlarda, yani araştırma etiği aslında çok evrenseldir, çok ahlaki hususları içinde barındırmaz ama her ne kadar çok evrensel olsa ve ahlaki hususları içinde barındırmasa da işin içine insan girdiği zaman her zaman özellikle de sosyal bilim araştırmalarında bu çok ön plana çıkıyor. Yani insan denek içeren sosyal bilim araştırmalarında kişilerin background'u, ön yargıları, dolayısıyla da gizliliğe atfettikleri değer ve anlam hiçbir zaman etik kurul değerlendirmelerinde göz ardı edilmemesi gereken bir şey oluyor. Yani mesela Türkiye'deki bir vatandaşın gizlilik tanımıyla atıyorum Hollanda'daki bir vatandaşın gizlilik tanımı farklı olabilir. Ya da Türkiye'deki belirli bir gruba ait bir kişinin gizlilik tanımıyla farklı bir gruba ait kişinin gizlilik tanımı farklı olabilir. Dolayısıyla onların gizlilik ve mahremiyet issue'larına dikkat edebilmemiz için etik kurullarda hep case spesifik kararlar alınması gerekir. Bu nedenle zaten etik kurullar özerk kurullardır. Mahremiyet dediğimiz şey ise, mahremiyet hususunda bir araştırmacı eğer verilerin paylaşımını sınırlamayı taahhüt ediyorsa ya da veri paylaşımını sınırlandırmak için yasal bir gereklilik oluşturuyorsa aslında mahremiyeti oluşturuyor demektir. Normalde araştırmacı tipik olarak verileri belirli bir grup bireyle paylaşır araştırma dahilinde, yani kendi araştırma ekibiyle paylaşır. Dolayısıyla da bu şekilde aslında mahremiyeti korunmuş olur. Hasta verilerine, daha doğrusu insan denek verilerine erişimi bazı kişilere açar. O kişiler de genelde araştırma ekibinde olan kişilerdir. Ama bazen burada tabii hizmet alımı yaptığımız, hatta yurt dışından hizmet alımı yaptığımız, yurt dışına genetik verisini gönderdiğimiz insan denekler olabiliyor. Dolayısıyla biz o verileri araştırma ekibi dışarısında, hatta ülke dışındaki insanlarla paylaşmış oluyoruz. İşte o zaman da verilerin ne kadar anonim hale getirilebildiği sorunu ortaya çıkıyor. Bunlar aslında sorunu doğuruyor. Yani etik ikilemler başka etik ikilemleri doğuruyor. Çünkü mesela genetik veri dediğimiz şey anonimleştirilemez bir şey. Ama şimdi çok onların detayına girmeyeceğim. Onun için hani araştırma etiği ne kadar çok sınırları belirli bir şey olsa da bazen o sınırları genişletmemiz gerekebiliyor. Etik kurul onayına da çok fazla detayına girmeyeceğim tanımının ama biz etik kurul onayını neden önemsiyoruz, neden gerekli? Çünkü araştırmaya dahil ettiğimiz insan deneklerin, yani gönüllülerin araştırmadan kaynaklı kabul edilemez düzeyde bir zarara uğramadığını teminatını vermeye çalışıyoruz. Şimdi kabul edilemez düzeyde zarar şu demek. Her araştırmanın riskleri vardır. Risk fayda analizi yapılır. Risk fayda analizinde eğer riskler o faydaları elde etmek için göze alınabilir risklerse o zaman kabul edilebilir riskler olarak tanımlanır. Kabul edilemez riskler dediğimiz riskler zaten etik kurul onayından geçmez. Fakat burada iki temel soru çıkar karşımıza. Şimdi kabul edilebilir risk ama kabul edilebilir risklerin de kategorileri vardır. İşte az riskli, orta düzey riskli, çok riskli ve de bizim Türk mevzuatında olmayan minimal riskli bir tanım vardır. Minimal risk tanımının neden önemli olduğuna da değineceğim. Aslında mevzuata girmesinin de neden önemli olduğuna değineceğim. Şimdi birinci soru, bizim için önemli olan birinci soru şu. Hangi şartlarda, ne zaman, nasıl, ne için ve ne gibi gönüllü verileri için biz etik kurul onayı almalıyız? Bu araştırmacıların kafasındaki temel sorudur. İkinci soru da hangi araştırmaları biz etik kurul onayından muaf tutabiliriz? Burada bahsettiğim araştırmalar hep insan denekler üzerinde yapılan araştırmalar bu arada. Yani insan denek, bizzat insan denek üzerinde ya da insan deneyi verileri üzerinde yapılan araştırmalar. Diğer araştırmaları yani kendi konuşmamda yapmıyorum, dışarıda tutuyorum. Şimdi bu iki soruya cevap verebilmek için ve de kafalardaki o fluluğu dağıtabilmek için 4 tane hususa dikkat etmemiz gerekiyor. Birincisi etik kurul onayının gerekli olup olmadığı sorunsarının ortaya çıkış zamanlamasına değinmemiz gerekiyor. Bu biraz karmaşık bir cümle olabilir. Şöyle açayım. Araştırmacılar etik kurul onayına ne zaman gerek olduğu konusunda bazen sıkıntıya düşüyorlar. İşte funding agency'ye başvurmadan önce mi? Ya da biz funding agency'den paramızı aldık. İnsan deneklerle herhangi bir çalışmaya başlamadan üzerine. Ya da biz işte kolaboratif bir araştırma yapıyoruz. Farklı farklı araştırma ekipleri var. Ve farklı araştırma konular üzerinde çalışıyorlar. Mesela işte bir device geliştirilecek. O device'i geliştirmek için işte onun üzerinde çalışan bir mühendis ekibi var. Son derece işte teknik konulara çalışıyorlar. O bir araştırmanın bir parçası. Daha sonra araştırmanın diğer parçası, diğer ekip tarafından yapılan diğer parçası da sağlıkçılar tarafından o geliştirilen device'ın insanlar üzerinde denenmesi aşaması. Şimdi biz birinci aşama bittikten sonra ikinci aşamaya geçerken mi etik kurulu alacağız? Etik kurul izni alacağız. Yoksa birinci aşamayı başlatmadan önce mi etik kurul izni alacağız? Ya da araştırma bitti, biz bu araştırma sonuçlarını dergiye göndermeden önce mi etik kurul izni alacağız? Genelde bu sorun hep şurada patlak veriyor. Dergiye gönderme aşamasında. Ama ondan önce eğer bir şekilde işte Türkiye'de TÜBİTAK gibi ya da dışarıdaki diğer funding agency'lere başvururken ta araştırmanın başında o agency'ler etik kurul onayınız var mı yok mu? Eğer ki bu araştırmada etik kurul onayına ihtiyacınız yoksa da etik kurul onayına ihtiyacınız olmadığına dair yetkili bir merciden yazınız var mı diye soruyorlar. Dolayısıyla bu sorunsalı çözmenin en iyi yöntemi fonlama kuruluşuna başvururken etik kurul iznini hazır etmek. Yani araştırmacılara verebileceğimiz en temel sanırım öneri bu olabilir. Minimal risk tanımının olmamasından biraz sonra bahsedeceğim. Çünkü bu bizi 2 tane hususta yine sıkıntıya düşürüyor. Kişisel veri tanımlarının yetersizliği de hangi kişisel veriler için etik kurul onayına doğru gitmeliyiz, gitmemeliyizin sıkıntısını yaratıyor bize. Bir de etik kurul onayının hani bazı araştırmalar etik kurul onayından muaf olabilir dedim ya. Bunun kararını kim verecek? Çünkü bu karar bazen tartışılmaması gereken yerlerde de tartışılıyor. Mesela işte fonlama kuruluşu bilimsel değerlendirmesini yaparken projenin o bilimsel değerlendirme aşamasında bu araştırma etik kurul onayından muaf olsun mu olmasın mı tartışmaları bazen olabiliyor. Aslında onun yeri orası değil. Çünkü orası sadece bilimsel değerlendirmenin yapıldığı bir şey. Bilimsel değerlendirmeyi yapan panelistlerin ihtiyacı olan şey buna dair bir yazı görmek. Etik kurul onayı gerekliyse o etik kurul onayını görmek. Eğer muafsa da muaf olduğuna dair yazıyı görmek. Onun için bu kararı kimin vereceğinin belli olmaması, yani yazılı olarak belli olmaması bir sıkıntı. Fakat şunu söyleyebilirim, bu kararı ancak etik kurullar verebilir. Siz araştırmanızın, ben şimdi hangi araştırmaların etik kuruldan muaf olabileceğine dair de bir liste paylaşacağım sizinle ama yine de çok spesifik, çok artık karar veremediğiniz noktalarda sorumluluğu kendiniz araştırmacı olarak alamayacağınız için, bu sorumluluğu fonlayıcı kuruluşa da bırakamayacağınız için size en yakın etik kuruluna sormanız gerekiyor. Etik kurulda, herhangi bir etik kuruldan ya da işte bizim araştırmamız bu etik kurul onayından muaf olabilir mi diye sorup yazı almanız gerekiyor. Zaten muaf olamaz yazısı verirlerse bir şekilde etik kurul onayı da almanız gerekecektir. Şu Türk mevzuatında minimal risk tanımının olmaması hususuna şimdi geri dönüyorum. Minimal risk dediğimiz şey şu, insan denekler için araştırmada öngörülen zararın, olasılığının ve büyüklüğünün günlük hayatta ya da rutin fiziksel ve psikolojik muayene sırasında olağan olarak karşılaşılandan daha büyük olmadığı anlamına gelir. Yani bu kısaca şu demek. Biz günlük hayatta ne gibi risklerle karşılaşıyorsak minimal risk budur. Ve bizim yaşadığımız ortamda karşılaştığımız riskler kadar o düzeyde bir riskle karşı karşıyaysak araştırmada o zaman minimal riskle karşı karşıyayızdır. Minimal risk önemlidir tanımı. Çünkü eğer minimal riskle karşı karşıyaysak yani araştırmanın getirdiği ekstra bir risk unsuru yoksa o zaman etik kurul onayından muaf olabilir araştırma. Fakat minimal risk tanımı biraz önce de söylediğim gibi kültürden kültüre, coğrafyadan coğrafyaya da değişebilir. Aynı anketi buradaki insanlar üzerinde yaptığımızda belki o minimal riskten daha fazla risk içeren bir içeriğe sahip olabilir. Ama farklı bir ülkede yaptığımızda belki de o anketin içeriği sadece minimal risk içeren bir anket içeriği olacaktır. Dolayısıyla minimal riskin ulusal mevzuatta o ulusal şartlara göre tanımlanması, ona göre de hangi araştırmaların muaf olup olamayacağının da kararının daha rahat verilebilmesi gerekiyor. Minimal risk tanımının özelliğinin iki husus için gerekli olduğunu söyleyebilirim. Birincisi biraz önce bahsettiğim gibi minimal riskten fazlasını içermeyen insan araştırmalarının etik kuruldan muaf olabileceği, yani bunu exempt diyorlar işte İngilizce'de. Exempt from işte ethical review kararı alabiliriz minimal risk tanımını belirlediğimiz zaman. Ya da minimal riskten fazlasını içeren araştırmalarda da işte orta seviye araştırma ya da yüksek orta seviye riskli araştırma ya da yüksek seviye riskli araştırma diye ayrımlarını yapıp bazı araştırmalar için, yani orta seviye risk unsuru taşıyan araştırmalar için de hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesi yapabiliriz. Buna da expedited review deniyor. Fakat ne minimal risk ne exempt from ethical review ya da expedited review, bunların hiçbiri bizim mevzuatımıza tanımlanmış şeyler değil. Biraz şey gibi oluyor benim burada anlattıklarım galiba. Genel kültür gibi oluyor ama bunları sanırım hepimizin biliyor olması işimizi biraz daha kolaylaştırabilir. Şimdi bahsettiğim şey etik kurul onayından muaf olabilecek araştırma türleri. Yani minimal risk seviyesinde tanımlayabileceğimiz araştırma türlerine işte birkaç tane örnek vermeye çalıştım buraya. Normal eğitim uygulamalarını içeren, yerleşik ve yaygın olarak kabul edilen eğitim ortamlarında yürütülen araştırmalar minimal risk taşıyan araştırmalardır. Bunları mesela sağlık eğitimcilerinin yaptığı bazı araştırmalar ya da işte öğrenciler üzerinde yapılan bazı bir takım anket araştırmaları, çalışmaları bu kapsama girebilir. Eğitici testler, anket prosedürleri, mülakat prosedürleri ya da halkın davranışlarını gözlemlenmesini içeren araştırmalar da yine minimum risk seviyesinde değerlendirilebilecek araştırmalar. Ya da bir takım mevcut veriler üzerinde ya da patolojik bir takım veriler üzerinde araştırma yapılıyorsa ya da o verilerin incelenmesi söz konusuysa onlar yine muaf olabilir etik kurul onayından. Kamu yararı ya da hizmet programlarını inceleyen, değerlendiren araştırmalar. Bir de tat ve gıda kalitesini değerlendiren araştırmalar etik kurul onayından muaf olabilir. Bunlar hep ne dedim? Minimal risk unsurunun altında kalan, altındaki risk unsuru taşıyan araştırmalar. Bir şartla bu araştırmaların hiçbirinde insan deneklere ait verilerin kime ait olduğunu, yani kimlik tespitinin yapılamıyor olması lazım. Kimlik tespiti yapılabilir seviyedeyse veriler, o zaman zaten minimal riski aşmış olur. Dolayısıyla burada bahsettiğim her şey, yani muaf olabilecek araştırma türlerinin hepsinde minimal riskten bahsediyorsak kimlik tespiti yapılamaz veriden bahsediyoruz demektir. Peki hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesinden geçebilecek araştırma türlerine böyle bir değerlendirme yok bizim etik kurullarımızda. Fakat hani yarın öbür gün belki olur. Ya da klinik araştırma etik kurulları haricinde bazı üniversitelerde mesela işte sosyal bilim araştırmaları ya da işte farklı isimlerle farklı etik kurullar da tanımlanıyor. Bu hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesi aslında birazcık o etik kurulların incelediği araştırma türlerine kapsıyor olabilir. Yani Türkiye için en azından öyle bir şey söyleyebilirim. Tek tek okumayacağım ama mesela burada bizim önümüze çıkan hani en çok değerlendirebileceğimiz şeyler pazarlama için onaylanmış, onayı alınmış eğer tıbbi cihazlar üzerinde bir araştırma yapılıyorsa bunun için hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesi yapılabilir. Yani bu bir klinik araştırma, high risk taşıyan bir klinik araştırma değildir. Ya da kan örnekleri üzerinde yapılan araştırmalar yine hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesine tabi olabilir. İnvaziv olmayan yöntemlerle ileriye dönük toplanan bir takım biyolojik örnekler üzerinde yapılan araştırmalar için yine aynı şey söz konusu. Rutin olarak kullanılan invazif olmayan prosedürler için klinikte yine bunlar söz konusu. Araştırma dışı amaçlarla toplanmış, yani aslında klinikte sağlık hizmeti sunmak için toplanmış bir takım verileri biz ileride sonra araştırma amaçlı kullanacaksak Yine hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesine tabi tutabiliriz onları. Ses, video, dijital ya da işte bir takım farklı görüntü kayıtlarından veri toplayacaksak bunu yine hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesine tabi tutabiliriz. Bir de işte anket, mülakat ya da odak grup çalışması gibi sosyal bilimlerin çalışma alanlarına dahil olan bir takım insan araştırmaları planlıyorsak yine bunlar da yine hızlandırılmış etik kurul değerlendirmesine tabi olabilecek araştırma türleri diye nitelendirilebilir. Şimdi kişisel verilerin tanımlarının yetersizliğinden yine bahsetmiştim. Bu bizim kişisel verileri koruma kanunumuzda aslında kişisel veri tanımı var. Ama orada da işte kişisel verinin araştırma amaçlı kullanılması, yani güvenlik ve araştırma amaçlı kullanılacak kişisel veriler için bilgilendirilmiş gönüllü onan formu alınması şart değil. Bu aslında işte kişisel veri koruma kanunuyla aslında araştırma etiğinin örtüşmediği bir husus oluyor. Onun için araştırma amaçlı kullanılabilecek kişisel veri tanımının ekstra yapılması yine bizler için, araştırmacılar için rahatlatıcı bir unsur olabilir. Bilgilendirilmiş gönüllü olan formundan aslında bahsettim. Ona çok fazla detayına girmeyeceğim. Farklı hususları da var onun. Biz bu kişisel verileri araştırma amaçlı eğer yeni bir tanımlamaya tabi tutacaksak, kişisel verinin niteliğine, hangi amaçla işleneceğine ve ne kadar süreyle işleneceğine özellikle dikkat etmemiz lazım. Bu da aslında araştırmanın kapsamını belirleyen nitelikler. Dolayısıyla yeni bir tanımlama yapılacaksa bu 3 unsuru özellikle kale almamız gerekiyor. Bir de diğer bir sıkıntı noktası, son değineceğim husus bu. Çok detayına girmeyeceğim ama retrospektif araştırmalarda, yani geriye dönük veriler toplanmış, bir yerlerde store edilmiş herhangi bir veri, farklı amaçlar için toplanmış. Biz onları şimdi belirli bir araştırma konusu için kullanacağız. İşte bunların bazıları expedited review olabilir. Ama bazıları expedited review'dan high level bir ethical review'a girmesi gerekebilir. Bunların hepsinin değerlendirmesini aslında etik kurulun kendisinin yapması gerekiyor. Genetik veri çok apayrı bir husus. Çünkü anonimleştirilemeyen bir veri. Anonimleştirilemediği için eğer genetik veri üzerinde çalışıyorsanız bilgilendirilmiş gönüllü onan formunun kesinlikle alınması lazım. Yani bunun kaçarı yok. Bu hususta araştırmacılar genelde kendilerini rahatlatabilmek için battaniye onam denilen, yani blanket onam denilen bir şeyi alıyorlar. Genetik veriler ta en başta bu kişilerden toplanırken. O da şöyle bir şey oluyor. İleride yapılacak her türlü araştırmada bu verilerin kullanılmasına izin veriyorum gibi bir onam oluyor. Ama bu etik açıdan çok da kabul edilebilir bir onam türü değil. Çünkü öngöremediği, o an tanımlanmamış bir araştırma türüne özerk bir bireyin özerk bir şekilde karar vermesi etik açıdan mümkün değil. Dolayısıyla o battaniye onamlar her ne kadar belki yani hukuki seviyesini bilmiyorum, işi kotarıyor olsa da etik açıdan çok da işi kotarmıyor. Kadavraya ait verilerden bahsettim. Kadavra yaşayan birey olmadığı için ona ait veriler üzerinde yapılan araştırmalarda etik kurul onayı gerekmiyor. Ama şurada da şöyle bir şey söz konusu oluyor. Bazen kadavraya ait veriler o kadavranın yaşayan akrabalarını ilgilendiren veriler olabiliyor. Dolayısıyla dolaylı bir şekilde yaşayan kişilerin verilerine dokunmuş ve dolaylı bir şekilde yaşayan kişilerin kimliklerini tespit edebilir konuma gelmiş oluyorsunuz. Onun da ayrıca etik açıdan değerlendirilmesi gerekir. Bir de anonimleştirilebilen, anonimleştirilemeyen veriler var dedim. Bunların hepsi işte sağlık alanındaki karşılaştığımız etik sorunlar. En başa dönersek, bu etik sorunlarla elbette ki bir araştırmacının, etik alanında çalışmayan bir araştırmacının birebir bilgi sahibi olması ve bunu tek başına çözmesi çok mümkün değil. Biz bu sorunları aslında fonlayıcı kuruluşların bile çözmesini beklemiyoruz. Dolayısıyla eğer gerçekten bir etik ikilem içerisindeyseniz araştırmanızla ilgili, benim tavsiyem kendinizi her zaman garantiye almak için etik kurullara başvurun. En basitinden etik kurul onayına gerek yoktur. Bu araştırma etik kurul onayından muaftır yazısı alın ya da gerekiyorsa da etik kurul onayınızı alın. Bu sizi hem etik açıdan hem de hukuki açıdan şu aşamada en rahat noktaya taşıyabilecek yol diye önerebilirim. Yani benim söyleyeceklerim bu kadar. Beni dinlediğiniz için de teşekkür ederim.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Banu.
Thank you.
I was following it through the translation. I think that we can open the floor now for questions, and we can also discuss a few things that we missed before. So there are some questions I'll try to ask, and you can all answer, both you and Vincent. Let me check.
One researcher asked my slides. She told that she couldn't find my slides within the slide list. Yes, true, because I didn't share my slides with the organizers. So if they want, I can share my slides.
Yes, with your permission, we are going to share all presentations through our help desk, and participants will be able to also to download them, and the session was recorded, so you will be able to watch again if you'd like to watch our presentation again. Let me see. There are a few questions which can spark some discussions. Okay, I think we touched that, but I'm going to repeat it. There is a question. How much responsibility, values, or ethics can we pass on to AI? Example, autonomous cars, given or assuming that they don't have feelings, values, or ethical considerations. Can AI be trained in this respect? Can it train itself now or in the future? Would you like to start and say something about that, Banu?
AI issue is completely different issue because the human properties, like some of the human properties are unique with AI properties, but AI is not totally a human. It's a kind of human. So we can train AI also in ethical issues. And AI can also decide what it should do or should not do. But the main question is that are we at that point right now? I mean, in terms of the technological conditions. In my opinion, we are not at that point. I mean, we have to share the ethical responsibility with AI agents. I mean, we mean the humans. So, but what I feel or what I think is that in the near future, AI will be able to deal with more ethical issues. So things will be more complicated in the near future, but we have to talk today's conditions now, I think. So for today, we have to share the ethical responsibility with AI agents. I don't know what Vincent thinks or what he wants to talk about this issue, but this is my point of view.
Thank you, Banu. Would you like to add anything, Vincent?
Yes. So obviously, I agree that this is not the issue right now, technically speaking. It is an important issue, though, in terms of human-computer interaction, right? So humans are pretty good at understanding other humans. We get a very, very long training in doing that. Of course, for the machines, we are aliens, right? We're just completely different from the machines, and they're different from us. So I was thinking maybe it's a bit like you trying to understand a snake, but even a snake is much more similar to me than a robot, right? So you do have to sort of try and understand the human and the human behavior in an alien fashion. And so there are ways to find out in what state the human is, right? So for example, you have a computer interface and the human starts shouting at the machine. Okay, if that is happening, then perhaps you can say, human is apparently upset, and I should now be a little careful in the way I respond to the human so that the interaction is going to be successful. But that has nothing to do with properly understanding another human, right? Because there is no empathy there. If I see a human shouting that then I feel how it is to be angry and shouting. But the machine doesn't do that. It's just like trying to detect what the machine is up to. For us, it's for them trying to detect what we are up to. But yes, for human-computer interaction, this is important. And there's, of course, a whole field of people who deal with this.
Indeed. Please feel free to send your questions so I can see them. Some of them we have already discussed. Some of them are quite important issues, so they cannot actually be answered in just in such a session. I mean, it's more like statements or ideas that we may have, and some of them are, I'd say, existential. Yeah, I have another comment here. Technological inventions and projects should not be left unattended. I think the techno-justice process is very important. When we invented the atomic bomb, who will decide it is ethical? Who will decide whether nuclear power plants are ethical? It's a good question. Any comment?
I think this is also related with the ethical review of the research. I mean, the purpose of your actions may be different from time to time or from place to place. So ethical review is important before you share your research results or whatever you create at the end of your research. And before you share that creature or that results with the people around you or in the world, you have to be sure that those results are created with a good intent. So the only way to calculate this intent is an ethical review. So ethical research committees are very important. In my opinion, we need in the future or today, we need more expert ethical committees for especially AI studies, because the ethical problems within the AI research completely different from the other ethical problems within the other research areas. So while we are talking about an AI product or some other technological products, we always need to be sure about the intent of the researcher, which means that we need to be sure about it by an ethical review. So I always say that ethical review is the core point of a research, of a human research, or any research, that the results of that research will go through the public outside.
Someone could ask, though, what is an ethical review and how is conducted? I mean, it's a nice goal. We say that we are going through an ethical review. What is an ethical review? I mean, probably for us means something because we know the context, but how do we explain that to society? Who is the one that is going to decide?
Ethical review is we put through the research proposals within two reviews. First, a scientific review. We look for the scientific integrity of that research idea, and then we put that research proposal into an ethical review. During an ethical review, what we want to see is that ethics means problems about living things. And if we are talking about human research, ethical review means problems or risks about the human beings. So an ethical review considers the risk-benefit ratio among the human subjects who are participating into that research, or the risk-benefit ratio of the research results who are going to use those results in the public. So mainly the duty of the ethical review committee is to deal with the risks and benefits. Is it clear enough? This is a very
no, for me it's absolutely clear. I'm not sure if society in large understand what an ethical review is and how they. I mean, should we involve society? Should we leave that to the experts? And who is the expert?
Okay, experts depend on the. I mean, if you are talking about a clinical research, the experts of the ethical review committee are mostly the clinicians. Let's say if you're talking about a research on children, we need a pediatrician in the ethical committee. We need a lawyer. We need a person from the public who has no research experience. That's the representative of the public in the research committee. I mean, the number of the experts depend of the research committee, which is explained in the yasal mevzuat. I couldn't find the English.
It's okay.
Okay. So it depends on the content of the research. But yes, there is one person who has no research experience and who is representing the public in the research ethical research committees. If this is the question, so this will be the answer.
Good.
Can I add something to that?
Of course.
I thought that the kinds of questions that we see in the Q&A and then the questions that you just discussed, these are good questions in the sense that it is good that people ask themselves this question. So when I do things like what I was doing today, I'm trying basically to achieve one thing, namely that people get sensitized to ethical issues. So if you see that your work has ethical repercussions and that what you do in your everyday life has ethical repercussions, that is 80% of what I want to achieve. Okay, and then there is the question how you solve these problems, how you tackle them, and so on. And that is difficult. In some cases, there is no right solution that I can just, supposedly as an expert, whip out and show you. But it is very important that you realize that there are these issues and you deal with them. And that is also what the Commission wants to see, that you are dealing with these problems. They know that you cannot solve all these problems, but you have to be aware of them and say, I have a way to handle that awareness. So, and the world will continue to run in ethical and not so ethical ways, right? But the thing is that we are trying to contribute something positive because we now realize that as scientists and industrial people, we have societal responsibility. That message, I think, is just hugely important. We don't just do our thing, right? Even some decades ago, I would have discussions with scientists and they would say, why should I think about this? I'm a scientist. And that is what is now changing, I think. People now say, I should think about this because I want to be a good scientist and I want to contribute something positive to the world. And if you think about this in your life, then I have made a little progress in this. That's all I would like to achieve.
And it's an ongoing project in your life to think about those things. I think so being sensitive to these questions is almost all the job. And I think even in these projects, it's almost all the job. You have to explain what are the impacts of these things that I'm doing, and show that you understand these things and that you've done something to deal with them. So I'm happy with people being worried, so to speak.
Yeah,
that's fine with me.
I think you're absolutely correct in the fact that it is a more prominent question now. We tend to ask it more and more because we need to ask it, basically because we need to address it in our proposals. But the origin doesn't matter. I mean, we have to discuss these issues. And I remember it must have been at least probably 8-10 years ago when I was dealing with some security projects under FP7, and we had a case where we needed to address some data privacy and ethical issues and some kind of tests involving airport passengers, and we didn't have any ethics expert in the panel at that time. I mean, it was pretty early for us. We didn't foresee that when we were writing in the proposal, and certainly we didn't think that it would be a problem. And then different problems arose as we were designing our trial, and we had to ask a number of questions and redesign the trial in a manner that it would respect privacy, it wouldn't create any intrusion and all that stuff. And I mean, it was a unique process in the sense that we had to train ourselves to think over a certain framework, which at that point it wasn't anything difficult or extremely complex to address, but there were issues that you needed to think about, and once you start thinking about them, you will always find the solutions to overcome them or to address them appropriately. So I don't think that you need any kind of I mean, I'm talking mainly about handling ethics in proposals and projects, unless you have a really big issue like how to handle, let's say, artificial intelligence in ethics in artificial intelligence, or what do you expect from autonomous driving, how autonomous cars will respond in certain cases where you need to consider very complex and complicated issues. Then in most of the projects, the only thing that you need to do is consider some questions, and these questions are usually presented to you in the form. So you just need to think how you are going to implement your project in terms of research, in terms of involving other people, in terms of respecting their privacy, respecting their life, and all that. So it's not very difficult. It's common sense most of the times. It helps if you do that in a collaborative way. So if you involve the whole team in the process, because new problems arise. But I'd say in the majority of the projects, you don't need to be an ethics expert to do the things that you need to do. In certain projects, yes, you need to involve people that can ask the right questions and can guide you through the process.
I see a comment here, Salim Razı. He says that some institutions provide online ethics training before they start any research projects. This is really important, and this is really related to what you have told, because the main problem is that it's not easy to differ a practical problem from an ethical problem. I mean, we try to solve practical problems with our rationality, but when we're trying to solve some ethical problems, we use our rationality, we use our feelings, we use our gut feelings, we use common sense. I mean, lots of other criteria come into the area. So if we try to solve an ethical problem just with our rationality, that we will not reach a correct point. So these kind of ethics training problems are important because researchers need to define what an ethical problem during a research can be. They mostly cannot differ the practical problems of the research from the ethical problems of the same research. What I say is that the participants gave some examples from Canada and
Australia, I see, yes, and USA.
What I know from USA is that they, at least NIH, wants to see certificates from all the researchers that it's going to fund, which is a responsible conduct of research certificate. If you do not have that RCR, responsible conduct of research certificate, you cannot attend into an NIH funded project as a researcher or at least as a student. So everyone needs that certificate. Maybe as a funding agency in Turkey or as the universities in Turkey, we need to create those kind of RCR trainings for researchers or for graduate students at least, because every graduate student need to conduct research to be able to finish his or her training, his or her education program. So RCR is responsible conduct of research. Education is very crucial, I think.
Do you know if we have any similar institution or certificates or training courses in Europe?
Yes, I teach such courses.
Yeah, but I know that you teach them in your university, but
no, I don't teach them, not in the sense of teaching courses to students on ethics. Of course, I do that as well. But what I mean is that in Eindhoven, if you become a PhD student, you have to do an online and offline course sometime in year one of your PhD on research ethics.
Okay.
And I'm one of the many people who teaches these classes. So the view in Eindhoven is, and I think in most of the Netherlands now, that when you go into research as a PhD student, you're a beginner, you don't know the game. One of the things that you need to learn is you need to learn something about academic integrity. And I'm sure there are more specialized things, as Banu mentioned, about medical ethics or something like that. I do not know of any sort of official certificate on the European level or anything like that. I just know in our case, I know that it's a requirement for the PhD students.
Are your courses open though to other researchers? I mean, can a researcher from Turkey? No. At this point, this is just an activity of the university for its PhD. For the university students, that would be interesting. I mean, to have something similar in Europe as a kind of certification and overall training.
Sorry, this one was developed by one of my colleagues, Chris Wezen, and actually most of it is online. So in theory, one could even do it with some other tutor or by self-study. You would get some kind of idea of it. I don't know whether there's any plan to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. There is one last question.
We have a cooperation actually with METU that is going to go in this direction. So we, Eindhoven and the 40U ethics, we have a cooperation with METU in Ankara. And we are planning to have something like what you said, sort of ethics training modules that we share with them and then make available.
Very interesting.
To the rest of the world, so to speak.
Okay. There is another question about ethical review. Does the ethical review consider the benefit to the human subject or to the society at large, or both?
Actually, it's both, but the benefit to the human subject, we do not always expect a benefit to the human subject, because in some research, there will be no benefit to the human subjects that are enrolled into the study. There may be some risk, but there may be no benefit to the human subject. What we consider for the human subject is the risk-benefit ratio. But of course, for the society at large, we, in the ethical review process, we of course consider the benefit to the society at large. The aim of the research in general is create something beneficial for the society. So this should be considered. I mean, this is a must for an ethical review.
Yes, yes. Calendar Kilic also has another comment that we must categorize, and it is important to determine ethical boundaries before our projects. So if we have a project in earthquake early warning systems, there's no problem there. But if we make an AI embedded drone, we have to categorize it clearly. I suppose he means categorize the use of it, right? Or every production should be like a car with license plate to avoid abuse. What do you think about this issue, this topic?
This is a very difficult topic. This is often discussed under the heading of dual use.
Yes, yes.
Right? So you can make a system that is just a centrifuge for something, and you can use the centrifuge for making an atomic bomb.
Nuclear.
Okay, so I think there you just need to think very clearly and openly about what you think the dual use of your devices is going to be, right? So yes, if you can spray fertilizer with your drone, then you can also spray some poison with your drone, right? So it might not be a good idea to make it available to anybody who likes to use it, right? So that kind of thing is something which you clearly need to think about. There are limits to this, obviously, especially if you're doing more fundamental research, right? You're developing some algorithm, for example. You don't really know what people are going to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Could be doing with this.
Yeah.
But you might have an obligation of not pursuing a certain line of research, right? So if you think that your line of research will lead to really massive security problems, then perhaps you should just not do it at all.
Yeah. I remember at least in previous Horizon programs, you had to define, especially at higher TRL levels, if your solution was good, if there was even a possibility of your proposal, of your solution to be used for military purpose. So the dual use was addressed. So you had to address that in your proposal. I have another question, but I'm not sure that if I can understand it. It's in Turkish. I don't know.
The researcher asked that, can we create an AI agent who can decide what is ethically correct or what is not, according to a universal ethical value system? This is a good question, but I will answer it from a different perspective, because we are dealing with ethical values during an ethical consideration, but the problem is that not deciding what ethical value we have to deal with. We have, of course, universal ethical values. I mean, do not harm, beneficence. But the problem here is that sometimes, or most of the times, these ethical values conflict with each other. We want to be beneficial for someone, but at the same time, we don't want to harm that person. But during an ethical dilemma, in real life, this is not really easy. We both consider the ethical values at the same level. They are both important for us, but we cannot decide which one comes first for that unique case. So this is the problem. Can we teach an AI agent to be able to solve those kind of ethical dilemmas or not? Can we teach an AI agent to solve or to find a solution for conflicting ethical values? This is not even easy for humans.
Exactly.
So that's the problem, I think. I mean, the researchers actually, I think, trying to ask this point, or what I understand from his question is this. So if a kind of consideration is difficult for humans, we cannot share that responsibility or that kind of consideration with other agents, at least right now. That's why, as I said previously, we have to share our ethical responsibilities with AI agents. We cannot give the total responsibility to them.
Yeah. We can't just delegate. We need to share.
We need to share. We need to share at least today. But everything is changing rapidly. So maybe next year or maybe 5 years later, we will be talking about some different aspects.
That's true. That's true. I think we can wrap it up. I'd like to say that we are going to have to extract all the questions and the discussions that we have. Some of them from the questions and the chats were very, very interesting. And I have a comment from Sinan Senel saying that yes, in MED2, they are working with Eindhoven, as Vincent said, on the umbrella of Ethics Center, and they will be able to provide training and education for researchers and professionals. Very interesting development. We can talk about ethics for hours and hours, and still we wouldn't come with one unique conclusion. But I think that we had a very fruitful discussion, and I'd like to thank Vincent and Panu for their contribution. It was really exciting listening to you both, and I see from the comments that we tried to spark some questions, and I believe that these questions are being asked now. And I'm sure that it was, I hope that it was beneficial for not only for writing a proposal, which was our initial aim, but for trying to consider and think the questions that you need to ask into your, the ethical questions that you need to ask into your projects. Thank you all very much for staying with us here. We will upload all the training material into our help desk, and have a nice afternoon. Have a great weekend. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.